Well, hello and welcome everybody to episode 57 here of the Grid Talk podcast. Today's July 16th, 2025. My name is Alexander Searle. Joining me today will be my lovely co-host, Emery Lida. Caleb Viesko will not be joining us today. He's unfortunately under the weather. So too is Emery Lida, just I guess not as much as Caleb. Caleb's obviously, he's been bedridden for the last couple of days. Don't want to make him go on the show when he's feeling a little bit too sick. And obviously Krith Warren will join us a little bit later on, about 10 minutes into the show here. But we're going to delve into what we saw at the Stars Championship Series this past weekend and obviously kind of recap the CKNA Summer Nationals. Emery Lida, first of all, welcome to the show. New background for you. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, right after our trip to Ohio, we came back to Charlotte for approximately 12 hours, got packed up, and drove down to Tallahassee yesterday. Got settled in last night, got my bed in, and then today's been all about just putting a desk together, putting together new furniture. Shout out to my parents on that. They've been a huge help. I would be completely under the water without them. And I'm under the weather too. So it's a great time. We've got a tropical depression that just kind of came through here as well. So times are great in Tallahassee, Florida. But no, it's a nice apartment, nice new place. Excited for the future to come. I'm going to be spending a lot of time at this desk over the next few months, the next couple of years, hopefully. And yeah, it's a new adventure. Very busy week for me because I just wrapped up, obviously, Stars Championship Series. Going to go straight from here, basically, to Route 66 in Norway. So, week and a half, middle of it all, and enjoy the ride.
I'm excited for y'all to go to Norway. You know how much I love that track. Norway's a top 5 track in the country, and I've said that before, and I'm glad that we're going back.
I feel like I might have some crow to eat after this weekend with what I've said in the past about Norway, but I'm excited for it too. It's been 7 years since I've been there. Uh, Fun facility, fun track to watch, fun track to drive. Yeah, cool place.
Well, before we bring Krith Warren in, obviously this past weekend was round 3 of the Stars Championship Series, and to say that there weren't fireworks would be an understatement, I'd say. I mean, first of all, it was good to have you back on the mic this weekend. Obviously, Caleb couldn't make it, so we brought back an old friend. Obviously, you've been behind the scenes for the last year and a half, doing the production side and doing a killer job. All the stuff that you guys see back at home, all the replays you see on the production side, that's either Emery Lida, Simon Sykes, Carson Clements, Taylor Burris is now getting onto it as well, Jake Faulkner, but Emery and Simon have been the guys that have been like they've kind of built up that production position, and so that's why we haven't seen Emery as much on the mic. But it was good to have Emery back and do the morning shows with me, and did a great job. But Emery, you and I got a chance to see some action this weekend. I think especially diving into the motos. Obviously, the main event lasted about a corner for the two protagonists, AJ and Morgado. But on the Saturday, we saw 2 different instances that we want to kind of dive into here before we bring on Krith Warren. The first one, I think, is on the OKN Stars side of things. I want to start with this one first because the Pro Stars one's going to take a little bit longer to actually dive into. But on OKN Stars, we saw Gassiet Lee in Moto 2 put it in the wall right before a red flag incident. The red flag came out due to weather, and with that, obviously, usually they go back to the lap prior, and Gassiet Lee was originally deemed allowed to start back to where he crashed from right when the red flag came out, which was from P2. He rolled off P2 on the race restart, got up to the lead, didn't look back. He won the race provisionally. We'll dive into what we saw before we get into it here. So I'm going to
On
add
the
this.
inside of Maverick McKenna, and brings his teammate Mason Kuhn with him as one of the leaders has gone off into the wall. Into the wall. Is that Gassiet Lee? It is.
To have here, and look at the back right.
I think we got some moisture. I think we have some rain. Hands are going in the air. Are we going red right now, folks, or are the drivers just saying that they're seeing it? No,
that is rain.
That is definitely red flag. Rain in the air. This session will come to a halt.
Yeah, guys, so they're going to go back to the last completed lap. So a bit of a mulligan there for Chase Gassiet Lee, who found the outside wall. They're going to let him go back and restart P2.
As they head through 13, 14, 15, well, it can't be crazier of a day for this young man, but he takes advantage of the opportunity that presented itself. Gassiet Lee wins Moto 2.
And now before I kind of get into my response, obviously Emery's response, we spoke about it a little bit on the morning show, but I've had more time to kind of think about it. I think Emery has as well. We don't have Christian Marsh here or anybody from Stars, but we did obviously interview him Sunday morning during the morning show after the incident that happened on Saturday. And so let's play kind of what we heard from Christian before we get into our opinions. The incident, right? Obviously, you guys honoring the mistake on your end. I know as of last night, you guys kind of took away the results. Has that remained the same this morning?
Yeah, for sure. Ultimately, Gassiet Lee, our timing this weekend and race control is in a mobile toter. Just the nature of the track, they don't have a tower, so we're working through some things there. And when Gassiet Lee dropped out, the marshals didn't timestamp when he dropped out. So we set the order. It goes back to the last completed lap, right, for the restart order. And Gassiet Lee was on that order, and nobody caught before they sent the group back out that he was on the order, but he actually retired about 20 seconds before the call was made for red. So when the call was made for red, it stops the clock. It gives us a timestamp. And then in video, during the race, video went back and was like, oh, the driver dropped out and retired 20 seconds prior to the red. So ultimately, he shouldn't have been allowed to rejoin, right? So it puts us in a situation where we made the mistake, but it's still important to do the right thing, right? And just sometimes you got to eat a shit sandwich and honor doing the right thing sometimes sucks, but anyone who thinks that they can do this job and do it perfect, I invite them to promote go-kart races, because there's so many moving parts, and like anything in life, you're going to get some right and you're going to get some wrong, and yesterday we got one wrong, and we're just trying to make it the best we can from there.
So obviously a lot that we can kind of take away from Christian's response there. Emery, I'll kind of start with you on this one, because I know you have a pretty strong opinion about it. I think I don't want to kind of spoil what your side is, but why don't you kind of dive into what we heard from Christian and your viewpoint on it all?
Yeah, so as Christian stated, and as the Stars rulebook stated, what they deem a retirement does not necessarily coincide with the end or completion of a lap or a timing loop, which varies by series, varies by race category, whatever you call it. And so in this case, Chase Gassiet Lee crashed out of the race, was deemed to have retired, as Christian said, about 20 seconds before the red flag was administered. Therefore, he was out of the race. And by Stars rulebook, you can't be out of a race and re-enter the race. So the first step is plain and simple, and Christian kind of a little bit danced around it, is Stars messed up the initial call. No ifs and buts about it. They incorrectly deemed him to be in the race. He was out of the race. They allowed him to continue. Shouldn't have been able to continue. That's that. As far as the administration of the penalty, which I think is the more controversial aspect of it, as far as Chase getting disqualified for the race or put to the rear of the race after the fact, after everyone had dinner, everyone had chilled out on Saturday, he gets a message DQ'd, thrown to the back of the grid. That in itself is obviously very frustrating for Chase. I don't want to discount that, because in his case, he's done nothing wrong. He is crashed out of the race, rejoined, won the race. As he said, if they, off the record, if he had been given the opportunity to start at the back of the grid as opposed to a pure DQ, he would have taken it, but he wasn't given that chance. And so for him, it's frustrating, but for Stars, they did what they had to do. They misadministered it in the first place. There's no getting around that. But you can't just make an illegal driver keep the result, right? If you drive a cart that's completely blatantly illegal and they catch it after the race, that result's getting away. Even if they didn't catch it in the first session, even if you qualify on pole, you win the pre-final, whatever, you're still gonna get DQ'd from the race. And in the case of Nikita Johnson last year in USF Pro 2000, the way that other race series do that is they give points penalties. Within a weekend, the same thing applies, right? Like even if it's not a points penalty, if you take away the heat result, you put Chase to the back of the grid, it accomplishes the same thing. Additionally, the easiest way to explain this to other drivers is in F1, if you are found guilty of having a track limits violation, if you go 4 tires off in qualifying and you make it through to Q2 and your lap in Q1 is later deemed to be illegal, you don't just get to keep the Q1 lap and start the race from, say, 11th. They invalidate the Q1 lap. They push you down to 17th. And so even though you might have gained more spots after you were incorrectly allowed to do the next session, you still have to start back where you would have qualified. And so that's the case. It's a tricky situation for stars to be in. Mistakes happen. In the same way that Chase made a mistake to drop off or crash the cart, stars made a mistake in the administration of the penalty. Now, could it have been handled a little bit better? Possibly. I think that there was certainly a little bit of confusion around the application of the rule. And that's something that, as a series, cannot happen, at least in the first. To have a gaffe of that magnitude during a red flag and have time to kind of sort it out is something that needs reflection. But as far as actually applying the penalty and how stars did it, I don't think there was any other way that would have made people happy and been correct based off of the rule book. So it's an unpopular opinion. It makes me seem like I'm like a party pooper and like kind of rain on people's parade. But I think at the end of the day, stars kind of had to do that, or else the rule book, you're basically saying if the officials get it wrong, then you can cheat, or not cheat in Chase's case, but you can get away with something that you absolutely should not have gotten away with. And if they don't catch it, whatever.
Yeah, you leave it up for subjectivity, and that's not what you want. I think so. I remember in the moment that Saturday night, I remember I went up to you guys, and I said like, "Oh, I disagree with the call. Like I think Chase should be allowed to maintain his win." And then after your explanation, after kind of thinking about it, after hearing Christian's response, I reflected on it, and I agree with you. It's an unlucky situation if you're Chase. It's not a good position to be in if you're stars, right? I do not envy the decision they made, because that's got to be rough. Because like you said, I mean, Chase kind of mentioned to us off record, he said, or off track, sorry, if they would have just allowed me to start last, I would have said yes, and he would have most likely made up more spots than losing his win and getting put to the back of the grid. Ended up actually working out for Chase. He made up, I think, 13 spots in the main and finished 6th. But obviously, who knows what could have happened if he started further up the field. But nonetheless, it's one of the situations where, like you said, it's in the rules. You can't just say, well, we missed it and you got to win out of it, because now if you're other teams, right, like obviously this is kind of a one and done situation, because I'm sure the next time this happens, they're going to be extra careful about who is starting where, what situation occurred before the red flag. There'll probably be a little bit more detail involved in their decision. With that, though, again, I think stars made the right call. I don't want to talk about it too much more because you and I both agree on it, at least on my end. I know you kind of want to talk about one more thing here, Emery, but on my end, I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, I just have one more thing, and it's something more so like the rule and nothing to do with the decision itself. To me, it's a tricky can of worms in non-OKN classes, because OKN and shifter as well is kind of like the outlier of, like, you can't just feasibly start an OKN without getting out of the cart, getting it back started, right? So in that case, if you're in the barriers, if you can't refire the cart, chances are you're done. But if this were to happen in a KA category, in theory, if I was in a crash at Trackhouse Motorplex where I flipped over, I could still become Hercules, flip the cart back over, restart the cart, and go again. And I would still technically be in the race. Like, where do you define a cart as being retired? To me, that sounds like a subjective ruling. I think it's kind of bailed out on the OKN side because you have engines that can't refire. But if this was a KA, my instinct would be if I was Chase, I'd be like, look, I might have walled it. I might have gotten out of the cart, but that doesn't mean I can't get back in, refire, and go. So I think in this case, if this happens in another class, I think it could be a lot more confusing, a lot less black and white than it is now. And so I do think that's a rule that in general Stars probably needs to clarify a little bit and sort of make it clear in the next drivers meeting. Because honestly, I didn't know how Stars did the retirement procedure. I didn't know how they adjusted the timing loop. I know other series, other races I've done in the past, they dictate it based off of end of the time, end of the scoring lap, or in the case of Rock, end of the sector if you come to a stop. So just something that needs to be looked at. But certainly, I think in the case of like a K wreck, it can be a lot more confusing.
On that note, before we bring on Keith Warren, there's still one more thing we have to talk about, and it's arguably even more spicy, right? It's this one is even more, I think, subjective, at least on my end. Before I show the clips, because obviously for those who watched in and tuned in this weekend, we got to see Andrew Boyd show back in a shifter cart, first time I think in many months, about half a year, in much better shape, ready to go for wins, and well, he showed it. Wild Thing was in full action this weekend and stirred up the pot as per Andrew. But before we get into some of the highlights, and this is not just for Andrew, I think we have, I think both him and AJ were culprits of a couple of incidents referring to blocking. Before I show the clips, though, I do want to get Christian Marsh's response to a question I asked him about blocking Sunday morning during our morning show, kind of referring to the clips we're going to watch afterwards.
Sam, what is kind of your guys' take on what classes as a block versus not? Does it depend on the class? What is it?
Yeah, so I mean, blocking is one of those things like with Joe and I, and we're like old school racers, right? So for us, blocking is like, it's kind of a cop-out. Like, you shouldn't be blocking. You know, it's hard for us to have that old school mentality of like, if you block, the guy behind you should just move you, because we obviously want the racing to be safe. So ultimately, the way that we define blocking is two moves, right? Like, you can, when you come out of the corner, you can move back down the track to defend as much as you want, but once you move down, you can't come back. So obviously in that incident with Budoso going up the hill into the keyhole, you know, you can see the tram lanes from where they start their club stuff. And Budoso comes out of the corner all the way, runs all the way back down to the bottom of the track, and then moves up 2 tram lanes. And that second move is for sure like the blocking, right? So it's something that, you know, obviously
Hudson
we've
Brown
seen throughout
interview
all of the
queue.
events this year, not even just Stars, that drivers who are blocking or running really defensive, the drivers behind them will get frustrated and just bin them, and we don't want that either, right? And it's one of those things that it's hard to write rules. It's hard to write rules on something that's nuanced, so it kind of has to be black and white. So basically, it's like if you zig, you can't zag. And it's unfortunate that it took the win away from Andrew, but I'm sure he'll come back and sort it out today.
First of all, shout out Hudson Brown interview queued. For those who don't know, if you probably heard Emery talking there during the interview. Obviously, when we have our mics hot, only one of us can talk on the microphones. It's all good because that was Emery's first time on a mic in a year and a half. But
I was going to say,
that's pretty funny.
hey, if there's one thing Alex has taught me over the years, don't say anything too crazy over the mic. Even when you don't think that you're hot, you still might be hot. So, hey, it was giving the viewers a little bit of foreshadowing, you know. Hudson Brown interview coming up next.
You just
Give it
had
about
to
2
let 'em
minutes.
know.
Yeah.
There's a lot that Christian talked about in that interview that I think is interesting, right? First, I think his quote of, you know, blocking is a cop-out. I think because some people refer to blocking, from what I've heard of, as going down to the bottom of the racetrack and defending your position. No, defending is different from blocking. In Christian's case, right, blocking is 2 moves. Defending's 1. You're defending your position. You are allowed to defend your position as long as it is in pro action. If you're reacting to the guy behind you, for me, you've lost the ability to actually defend your spot, and now he reserves the right to some level of racing room. That's the way I've always looked at it. That's the way I think most series look at it. That's the way most race directors look at it. That's the way that most drivers should look at it. With that, and I think we had a pretty interesting scenario in terms of the racetrack we were at, with the class we were driving on, with the level of grip, and the way certain corners kind of are shaped. I think it was the perfect storm for me, looking at some of these clips that we're about to show, of is it blocking, is it not? So we're kind of gonna let's call it a new segment. Why not? Is it blocking, is it not? We've compiled kind of a bunch of clips from both Boy to Show and AJ, in which there was defending, there was blocking, and we have a couple of clips from the ones that were actually called penalties. So we'll kind of play them here. This first clip, Emery, correct me if I'm wrong. This is the one that Boy to Show got penalized for.
Yes. My understanding of this was the call for Boy to Show to get a penalty on the last lap of Heat 2 or of Moto 2 and defending onto turn number, I think it's out of turn 7 into turn 8.
Out of turn
6
into turn 8.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, and I don't want to spoil the clip too much, we'll kind of I'll play it through and then I'll give my opinion on it all. So yeah, out of turn 7, down the front, or I guess I'm going to call it the front straightaway, but this is actually the back straightaway, into turn 8. That right there, you're saying was deemed the block that gave him the penalty.
Yes, from what I heard trackside on Saturday night, and from what Christian said in the interview, it lines up with what they decided was blocking.
Okay, so this is where things get interesting, right? And obviously, we have quite a bit of clips to go through. I don't want to take up too much time because I want to bring Keith on. There's a lot to talk about with Keith.
Why don't we bring Keith on to listen to this or to give his take on this?
I like that idea a lot better. This is kind of an audible here, but Keith, before we kind of bring you on, give me a thumbs up if you're ready to join in right now. If your audio is working, I know you're having some audio issues behind the scenes. Thumbs up from Keith. All right, Keith, you got us good?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, perfect. First of all, welcome to the show.
Hey, good, glad to be here, guys. Appreciate it.
I love it. I mean, before the show, Keith kind of told us, because we were kind of explaining, what the show is going to be like. He said, listen, we're at 57 episodes. I've watched at least 40 of them, which I love to hear. I love that. But it's actually a good caller from Emery, because I want to hear your take on this, because we have a couple of clips to go through. This first one, to me, is actually the least egregious of the ones we're going to see, in my opinion. Down the back straight, out of 7, goes low in pro action, and I guess the fade up is what they're calling. If I stand corrected here, Emery, it seems like from what Christian said in the interview, this is allowed, right? Out of 7, he goes low before Mateus. You are allowed to do this. At this point, he's now the tram lines they kind of tell on Andrew here, right? Because now at this point, you have to stay here. The only thing that's a little interesting is the way the corner is shaped for turn 8. You kind of have to go back up a little bit. And so, in my opinion, and maybe I'm going to come across as a dirty racer. I don't want to come across as a dirty driver, because for most of the other clips I'm going to show here, I'm going to say, hey, that's probably not a good move, probably a penalty. But of all the clips, this is probably the one where I don't know if I call this on the last lap of the race. I don't know if I call this. You fade up for a corner that the entry becomes quite a bit tighter than the actual straightaway is. So I don't want to talk too much more about it. Emery, I want to hear your take, and then we'll hear from Keith.
Yeah. To me, I think it depends on how you define what spacing is, right? When Andrew moves down here, at this point, on the track, he is a length and a half up from the grass, pretty much. As we get Robert Warren, his take on it, saying it's not blocking. Funny enough, actually, Colin Ward had a little bit of a debatable blocking call at CKNA, I believe it was, Alex.
Yeah,
don't have the clip for that one. But
so we don't have the clip for that one. I'll briefly talk about what Emery was discussing. This is kind of foreshadowing for one of the things I want to bring up with Keith, but it's the in-race penalties that Colin received a penalty for. We didn't really get it. The reason why I didn't clip it is we didn't get a good enough angle, and I don't want to clip something that we didn't get the perfect angle of. But Colin kind of gave Overbeck a nudge, put him off the racetrack. They gave him an in-race penalty. He had to give up the spots that Overbeck lost. but it wasn't due to blocking. It was actually to do with kind of driving a guy off the racetrack. We'll get into that more
Forcing
later.
over. Yeah. So, anyways, Andrew, a car length and a half above the grass. So, if you take it down to this point, he's obviously more than a car length and a half off the grass. So, in that move, yes, more than one move. But if you look at how he sets up the corner, he's like adjusting for the grip and or the like lane. And at this point, before the corner, even there's still the track narrows up, right? So relatively speaking, I mean, there's still a little bit of a fade back, but he's going back right because the track itself kind of snakes itself back to the right. It's a little bit like if you look at the main straightaway in F1 on a track like Imola. Imola's straightaway kind of snakes itself to the right. And so you can be on the white line, carry the wheel straight, and you're going to be moving to the right. Is that a double move, or is that just simply following the?
Well, for me, the
track?
perfect track is turn one Orlando to kind
Yeah,
of compare this
exactly.
to.
Orlando is the
Reverse turn
perfect.
one Orlando.
Yeah, and so in this case, I think there's a little bit of a move back even before the track narrows up. Like again, to Christian's point, it's hard to argue with this, right? Here he's in the middle of tramline one. Here he's on the outside or on the middle of tramline two. This is before the corner. He's got Mateus on his rear bumper. This is technically two moves. Now, do I like it that way? No. I think that is a warning, a reprimand, no time penalty because a 3 or a 5 second penalty for that kind of move is ludicrous. Like there's no real consequence by doing this. Now, this argument by Derek Wargo, I want to point this out. To me, this is a fallacy. You make your bet on if you block all the way to the white line, at that point, if you can't make the corner, that's your own problem, right? Like you can't.
You've made your bed. You got to lay in it, right? Like that's
Yeah. If you force yourself all the way down to the white line, and you like if say Andrew was all the way down on the grass here, right? Then I would say, okay, he can't go back up much. At that point, it's no different than if you completely shut the door, you're all the way like cutting grass, you have to stay there. Even if the corner bit is extremely difficult, it's part of life, it's part of racing. So I don't think that's a reason. I think though, the way this corner is like profiled and the way that this track is profiled, where the straightaway kind of bends back right, makes this look more egregious than it is. And in my opinion, this is fair game. I would say maybe you give Andrew a warning for this, but I think 5 seconds as he ended up getting a penalty for it was pretty egregious.
Keith.
Yeah, I look just as a racer and a guy who watches a lot of races, this doesn't even pass the smell test to me that this was blocking. But now I'll put my asterisk on this. I have spent a lot of time with USPKS as they've built out their video marshaling system. With CKNA as they've done the same. I've watched a lot of things from different angles. And one angle does not tell the truth.
Yeah.
As I watch this, I'm thinking there's no way that's a block. But if you give me a side profile shot or a drone shot of that, I might be able to tell that Mateus actually had to make an evasive move to not slam into the rear of him there. So, one angle doesn't tell the story. So, and those guys, they've been doing video review for a very long time. They're all pros in there. They're all have race experience. So they're not just pulling something out of their ass here. They know what they're talking about. And so if they deem that that was a block, then I'm going to go with them on that. This angle doesn't look like it to me. And I watched the racing that weekend. There was a lot of other stuff that was like, those were way more egregious issues than this was.
Yeah, there you go. To the point. I love it. We're getting to the next one here. And this is where I think things get a little bit more black and white. And I think off the rip here, this is kind of going to lead into one of my points of the reason why I kind of asked Christian, like, what is blocking to you guys? Because it seems like we're still at that day and age where it's not black and white, right? Like we want it to be black and white, but it almost seems like blocking is a little bit more subjective than we actually make it out to be. This next clip, this is from Moto 1. AJ leading. This was kind of the Boyda Show special, I want to call it. This was Andrew being just Andrew Boyda Show, right? Wild thing, making it fun for us. The problem is certain situations like this, where that, to me, should not be allowed. You have a driver in Justin White who, same exact corner, out of turn 7 into turn 8. Justin White, at this point, he makes the move to the inside first. What deems a block is, for me, there's two different ways you can look at a block. You either you start low, end the corner high. I think turn 8 leaves it up for a little bit of discussion because of the fact that the entry then tightens up. So you almost have to open up for the corner a little bit more. But still, number 2, a move in reaction. And what that means is you do the move after the guy behind you. Well, Justin White goes for the move. He's actually alongside Andrew here. And at this point, if I was a betting man and I didn't know the result of this clip, I'd say Justin White made a clean pass through on Andrew. The problem then occurs to me is under the brake zone. And then the same argument applies. And this is where the one asterisk on my take is, well, Andrew's line into the corner didn't change. Because the entry tightens up, it left Justin in a pretty precarious position. The issue arises to me when, from the laps that I've seen in the past, this was an early turn in for Andrew. I think that's where the issue
Look at
kind
the
of
angle
arises.
of the go-kart.
Yeah, the turn in is it's really early. So that's where I'm getting to my point of this, to me, is a much more, that should be a penalty than the clip we just saw.
Yeah. No, I thought this one was, there's another point of if someone beats you to the spot of a corner, like at the end of the day, if you make a move to get to that spot and try to counteract, to corral them, to block them, that's your penalty. And again, it cost both of them a spot. I think
And that's probably why it wasn't deemed a penalty.
it's because Andrew made off worse from it. But
Yes.
then again, at the same time, AJ got a 5-second penalty for the incident at the start of the race in the final, and he definitely wound up worse from the incident than Mateus did. A 5-second penalty when you're in the pit lane on lap 2 is not going to do much, you know. So I don't know. To me, from incident 1 to incident 2, Justin's established position. I guess the argument there is at this point, they're so far down the straightaway into the corner, it turns into just an avoidable contact discussion rather than a blocking incident because they're already on turn and they're already in the braking zone. And so then maybe it doesn't rise to a penalty, but if we're calling penalties off of the views that we have, which great point by Keith there, of like you can only tell what the angles will show you, right? In this case, we don't get a proper view of Andrew's kart placement. We get a pretty decent view of it. We definitely see that he turns in, compared to AJ, a solid 20 feet earlier, which is questionable. If you did that if Eli wants to do that under Josh Oates' tent, you'd be doing push-ups probably. But
here's
you can't ever.
One thing in Andrew's defense, and this is what I'd be looking at as I'm at video marshal. I don't see his hands make an adjustment to turn the wheel there. I think this is under braking that it lurches left.
Yeah.
But that goes to like what in basketball we would call a player control foul. Like it's your responsibility still to control the kart. He can't say, "Oh well, I didn't turn the wheel; it was just under braking it happened." You still have to control things.
I think another thing in Andrew's defense, and this is probably why it was deemed a no call, is Andrew's hands are straight here. And at what point do we think more than the braking is there was a slight bit of contact here? And I think this is where it almost, I can see the argument for like the Rubbings Racing argument, right? Of two guys wanting the same piece of real estate. Neither are going to give. And unfortunately, none of them actually got the piece of real estate they wanted because Morgado put a higher bid in and he got both of them, right? So like that's where I think it was kind of like a self penalty on Boyda Show. Unfortunately for Justin White, kind of made off the worst just because he was going for a move, net gain of 0. I could see both sides. It's hard for me to say, oh, Andrew should get a penalty for that because, like, I think Warren Keith's best point is, again, we're only getting the front end of it all, right? We don't have the rear view angle, we don't have the side view angle, we don't have the onboard footage that Stars has access to, obviously, and so with that, I can again see the no call. For me, my biggest point is if you want to compare it to the first clip we saw, this is much more. I could see the point of if this was the penalty that Boy to Show got, I'd understand it more than I think the first clip we saw.
Yeah.
We'll dive into the next one here. And now, I don't remember if this next one is going to be. This is still.
This one's
Andrew?
This is a pretty light one, but it does show again. This was a normal lap, right? Where he.
So that was just.
This next lap was the more like entertaining one, so to speak. But this one, Andrew goes again down to the second like set of tram lines, then comes back up to the first set, right? Very small movement. Again, proactive in defense. This was no penalty, but technically speaking, he moved down, he moved back up.
Yes, this is where I think things get interesting, right? Because it wasn't deemed a penalty because there was no move by Justin White to make forward progress, right? Justin White remained stationary. He just stayed straight. Andrew went down, came back up, didn't react to anybody's move, didn't proact. It wasn't proactivated. It wasn't like in proaction any move, right? So to me, this is a nothing situation, right? But it does make you wonder, like, if that's allowed, like, okay, because I already consider white lining an epidemic, right? I think it's gotten worse over the years. It does make you wonder if like that could open up a can of worms of like, okay, if I'm leading the race and the guy behind me is not going for moves, I'm just going to start the lap at the bottom and end at the top, and it's not going to get called, right? So that to me is what you kind of start to open up if that gets allowed more. To me, I think it's a tricky situation because of the corner dynamic. Because of the design of the corner, there is the argument of like, I'm just making the corner. We'll go to the next one here. I think this is where things get really interesting. So that was Justin White making the move. And I think, again, probably a big reason why there was no call is, well, it didn't actually affect Justin White. But this is where Justin White is alongside Andrew, and Andrew kind of drives him down a little bit there. Then I think realizes, okay, Justin's fully there. There's a bit of contact, opens his hands up, straightens out for the corner. I see the no call here, but it's teetering on that line.
I'm gonna take a pretty strong stance on this one. If you as a series, as a karting community collectively is gonna say, we can't have swerving, we can't have driving down as a sport. This is as textbook as you can possibly get driving down. Not a swerve. The swerving part is debatable. That's too much to argue, right? Andrew looks over, sees Justin has not just gotten like to his inside, has established like credible side-by-side position. And still continues down, makes one bit of contact, makes another bit of contact. From the time that he looked to his right, he comes down over a kart length and a half and initiates wheel-to-wheel contact twice. I understand result-based, nothing happened, Andrew lost the place, whatever. But crowding exists. Driving someone down when they're already there is a reactive move. That should be a penalty.
Keith, I see you kind of pondering over there. What do we think?
Like, it's very difficult on the point of the series because the series want a deterministic, display. They don't want gray area. That's why I think stars went to the swerve rule or the two move rule on blocking. So many of these things are so subjective, and it's difficult. A lot of these calls sometimes end up being just made by corner workers on the track that see it in the moment, and they see one angle of it. It's got to get reviewed, man. It's so hard. This one is one of those things that I would have fell on maybe fell on the side of there should be a penalty for driving down here, but the fact that he didn't gain position, that in and of itself, negates the need for the penalty. Unless the series, and this is kind of where CKNA is coming from, the natural outcomes on the track are not necessarily the problem anymore. It is the general behavior of driving that we need to police a little better. And so you drop the hammer on someone if you think, okay, even though he didn't get the outcome he wanted by driving in this scenario, we're just not going to allow that. So the series are always in a tough place.
I'm gonna spin this a little bit. I'll bring it back to blocking, but this kind of opens up a question for me because I think your take on that is kind of where I stand. I've heard both sides to it, and I think, and Andrew said to us, Emery, on Saturday night when we spoke to him, the racing style in America is different. And that's obviously super subjective from a guy who loves to make things really fun for us. And I'm kind of summing up the words that he said to us on Saturday night. But to Keith here, it is racing, and this is I might come across as I don't know, on one side or the other here, but I have to ask: is racing to you a non-contact or contact sport? And I ask that in a way of like, I'm not saying should you be allowed to go out there and destroy somebody. But is like rubbing is racing? Is that where you stand, or is it like?
I think to some extent, and it really becomes part of the persona of the series and the package. I mean, we saw early this year with Scusa at Houston and the Bailiff Musgrave incident. We saw that they established a position that we are going to allow some level of that. Now, stars may look at that very differently. So it's about the persona of the series. Me as a race dad, and I had no background in racing or anything like that. Eli started in 206 racing, even back when they still had the Gold Cup noses. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Everything's so rough. People rough each other up. But that's kind of where we learned and what we started. So that, for example, in my mind, is what makes winning CKNA Grands so incredibly difficult. Because it's not just about being the best driver and having the best package. You've got to be aggressive in the right ways and find that line.
Okay. Emery, what do you kind of take from what Keith just said?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, people say contact sport, non-contact sport, whatever. I think it depends on the formula, depends on karting as a whole, depends on how big the race is, how small the race is. There's no finite answer. And personally, I honestly don't like when people say, oh, karting's a non-contact sport or karting's a contact sport, rubbing's racing. I think both of those are cop-outs in different ways. My best thing is I've won races, I've lost races where I've moved people, I've been moved. I've raced cleanly, I've raced where I would personally be on the line of is this something that I'm willing to do or not, right? You kind of adjust to how series are officiated, how the racing is officiated around you. I think my whole thing with officiating today, and this isn't a stars thing, this is not an Andrew Budoso thing or Andrew Budoso thing, not a stars thing whatsoever. Andrew's entertaining as all hell. I enjoy watching that dude drive. I enjoy watching stars races. I think they do a great job with the series. I think as a whole, this kind of incident shows that there's a natural result based bias with officiating. And again, on a personal level, I despise that. If I do something wrong where I double move someone, I'm gonna whether or not it works out or not, shouldn't have a bearing on if I get a penalty. Because ultimately it's the same move and you can't control the controllables, right? One incident, maybe I end up upside down again. One incident, maybe I make the move anyways and the guy behind me barrel slams into the guy that did the double move and he's out of the race. In this case, it doesn't work for Andrew. But I think like if they wanted to decide on karting being more heavy in contact, I thought what Skusa did with the Bailiff and Musgrave incident to me was a pretty stand-up job of like they acknowledge that hey, like this is technically speaking contact, and we've allowed a lot of bump and runs to go. It's particularly in shifter over the course of this season and previous seasons. Why would this be any different? Battling for the win. I think if you're going to set a precedent, regardless of what the move is for, regardless of the outcome, the severity of it should determine the consequences. In this case, I think objectively, based off of everything that Stars has said and everything that we've heard in karting over the last 2 or 3 years when it comes to swerving, when it comes to driving down, when it comes to blocking as a whole, this rises to the level of the penalty. And again, don't see every view of it. We don't see exactly how much wheel Andrew feeds, but we do see his kind of reactive maneuver. We see him look over and then we see him continue driving down. As someone that had access to all 8 different angles that Kart Chaser has during the races, as someone that had 3 different cameras that had some view of that particular move, I can't say that my take from that angle is any different than my take on any of the ones that we have. And so, again, not a Stars thing, not an Andrew thing. If anything, I think Andrew racing on the line like we saw all weekend long was needed for kind of a litmus test for where we're at
This is
in
not
US
the first
karting and
time we've
shifter
seen
racing.
this year, but it's the first time we've seen somebody. I almost look at it as Max Verstappen, right? He's a guy that is widely publicized as somebody that you either love him or you hate him. And I think the same way with Andrew. You either love the way he drives or you don't. And for a guy like that to walk away with one penalty all weekend, and arguably the one penalty he got was maybe the one that he shouldn't have got, right? I think it dives into the topic that you brought up, Emery, of like whether like, and I said it earlier, the whether we want to believe it or not, and this is it'll probably never change just based off of the nature of any sport we watch. Where like we want to say it's black and white, but it's not. It's the same way like for all my football fans or even basketball, any sport out there, when you've heard it all the time, the way officiating is done in a playoff game is different than a regular season game, right? It's the age old let them play in a Super Bowl. Oh, I don't want to see that call in the Super Bowl. Why not? Why are we changing the way we officiate a Super Bowl versus a regular season game versus week 5? It shouldn't be any different, right? Obviously the aggression's up and the heat of the moment and the magnitude of it all, but it shouldn't change the way you actually call anything, right? Whether it's pro shifter or micro swift, in my opinion, it should be viewed the exact same way.
Yeah, 100%. You cannot change the general level of officiating from series or from category to category. Granted, I do think the bump and run discussion and shifter is a
little
bit different.
Yes.
Yeah, it's inherently going to be a little bit different than micro for a number of reasons. The speed the go-karts are going and how much contact it takes to move one of those carts out of the way. The weight of the carts, how difficult it is to kind of start and stop a shifter, and kind of the lines they take are inherently different, and difficulty overtaking a shifter. All those play a part, but as a whole, you can't take the result, you can't take the magnitude of a moment into consideration when making a call, but it's life. We know that happens no matter what series, no matter what sport. I mean, Keith, I know you're a Kentucky Wildcat fan. You've been in many Final Fours, Elite Eight games, and I'm sure you would attest to this, that when you get down to the wire in March Madness games, tends to be a more physical style of play than what you would see, in December against Western Kentucky or whoever.
And the cry of the fans is always, let them play. Let them play. Don't swallow the whistle. Don't let the officiating determine the outcome to this. Let them play. And I mean, while we all want it to be black and white and we want a consistent thing, the reality is there's humans who are making these decisions. And there's a lot of factors that play into that. For example, someone complaining like, well, I got moved and they didn't call a penalty. Yeah, but you were in 30th. No one was paying attention to you. When it happens up front, it's a little different. And that's just the reality of human judgment in a, for better or worse, a visually adjudicated sport. We are watching things in real time and making a decision about it. And the video review has kind of added an element to it and certainly helps us. But in the end, you've got to depend on some guy looking in the right place at the right moment to make that decision and call it in.
I think you bring up a good point because Brandon Ferris here left a comment. It shouldn't just be about the front runners. You should be able to call the penalties all the way through the field. And to Keith's point, we're getting to that level where it'll be where we can make those calls. But as up until this year, I'd say officiating was, and it still is, one of the hardest jobs. And it's a job that I would never want to do. I don't want to be a referee. I don't want to be a race director. I don't want to be a corner worker or an official because I don't want to be in that situation that I have to make a call on the spots. The cameras make a load of difference. Obviously, most drivers out there now rock some level of a camera, Smarty Cam, GoPro, whatever it is, and you are able to come in here and protest. Let's say you get moved and the guy that moved you didn't get a penalty. You can say, hey, that guy moved me. I want you to look at my camera. And you're allowed to do that. But I think we're getting closer to the level now where even if you're in the battle for 25th and somebody moves you or vice versa, those are starting to get called more. It's still obviously tougher for a couple reasons, right? For one, whether people like it or not and want to hear it or not, we only have certain cameras, right? We have 4, sometimes 5 cameras at a racetrack, us as Kart Chaser. And we're most likely going to show the most prominent battle on the racetrack. It doesn't have to be the battle for the lead. I think there's a misconception that we film the lead group the whole time because we don't actually. I think we do a pretty good job. Myself, having been in the race director seat a couple times this year, Riley can attest to you. He's our main director. We film whatever the closest battle is, unless it's the last couple of laps and the leaders are going after it, right? We try to bring you guys the action. With that, unfortunately, there's certain times where we might not film further back. So obviously we don't see things. With that, it puts even more emphasis on just the camera system that every series brings into play. And it also brings a lot of pressure on people. They're humans who are most likely in the heat of the moment on the last couple of laps watching the battle that can determine the race win more than the battle that can determine a pass further back. And yeah, to Brandon's point here, again, we covered Asher battling for 7th, right? More than the leaders. So again, situations like that, we try our best to bring you guys as good of action as we can. So to Keith's point, and I want to hear Emery on this as well. Do you guys think, and I want to hear Keith on this first, do you think we're getting better as series as a whole, as a collective, at making more consistent calls to the guys further back?
Yeah, I think so. It's been interesting as we rolled out the penalty system. The biggest complaint isn't, I don't like the way these is structured, this numbers. You hear over and over from people, I just want it to be consistent. I want penalties to be called consistent. And that's always going to be a challenge with human interaction. And here's really, let me, kind of project into the future. And I don't know how far this is. My guess is it could be as soon as 2 to 3 years, probably definitely within 5, as we loop the camera systems in to multimodality AI models that can watch all the cameras in real time and actually detect collisions, read the numbers. We're actually not that far away from a future where it doesn't matter if it was the lead pack. It doesn't matter if it was chaos on lap 1, that the AIs can watch all of it and say, okay, we need to review this incident in this corner and pull the clip up for them directly and let a steward look at that in real time. And as I've talked to various series about this future and the way this is going to work, one of the things I think we're going to end up doing is that you won't need as many staff at the track. We can take those clips, let them be reviewed remotely, and from people who have no connection to these drivers, to this series, so there's no bias, They're looking at it and saying, okay, and we'll show that video to 3 people, for example. And if 2 of them deem that it should be a penalty, then it's good. If 2 of them say no, then it's not a penalty. That future is coming, and it's just a matter of the technology kind of getting cheap enough to make it happen. Like if we had an unlimited budget, we could do it today. But the reality is we want to make karting cheaper for everybody. So those kinds of things are going to come in the future. How soon? I wish I could tell you for sure, but definitely within 5 years, hopefully within the next couple.
Emery, what do you kind of take from that? Because that's honestly, that's news to me in terms, and I love to hear it. I didn't know that was in the works. It was obviously something that we've discussed in the past of like what it's going to take to make the cameras great. So that's good to hear. I want to hear what you have to say about that, Emery.
Yeah, I mean, first off, Keith hits it on the point. It makes me very excited to talk about some of the other stuff we've got on the pipeline in the next little bit. But I think in the immediate term, there's natural limitations on officiating, right? And I think even as we get kind of AI integration into the future of our camera systems, the future of sort of our selection criteria, you're still going to have that little bit of internal bias of like race directors might spend an hour debating the Billy Musgrave Gavin Bailiff incident, and they might spend 25 seconds debating their teammates battling for 27th, taking each other out or whatever. There's nuances to it that if you have any sort of human interaction, any sort of human decision making are going to be present. But I do think the introduction of kind of AI and sort of kind of model-based thinking where it can detect those collisions, it can detect contact and flagging possible incidents. That has value, and I think it's the same jump forward that what you would see from as we've introduced more cameras and more vantage points on the racetrack, even before cameras, right? You think back to the last 15 years, we've seen first there was an improvement in terms of using lifts and kind of adding more race directors to various different parts of the track that allowed vantage points that previously were undetected to be used. We saw that before they went to the camera system. I thought USPKS did a good job of their race director placement being kind of top of the line in the early 2010s, right? Then we had SCUSA bringing in their camera system, which was a huge point at the time. We saw improvements in officiating. We saw improvements on the depth of officiating. Now I think the next step is as more technology gets integrated in, as I think you get people that are more trained towards utilizing the cameras, because I think that's another aspect. It brings us back to what I talked about a few months ago when USPS first announced their camera integration of the guys that are doing the officiating, the race directors still have to know how to use the cameras and how to utilize that as a basis point for their decision making. I think the future of karting eventually is going to wind up being in the form of a kind of NBA review. Think about how the NBA does it with their studio in Secaucus doing kind of deciding on the replays, where they don't get to decide what gets replayed. They don't get to decide what they take a look at, but they're the ones that make the decide on the penalty system. And a couple different things to discuss here. Kevin says his self-have a knowledge of what racing was moving someone. It's a step forward. You still require those who already have knowledge because teaching what is right, so what is wrong will without a doubt have some bias. I mean, I think a lot of that comes down to prompt engineering and sort of like threshold engineering with the AI on the initial like flagging discussion, and then utilizing what gets flagged as a whole separate criterion point, right? No different than with human input, how we view targeting in football, how we do those aforementioned NBA reviews, right? There's a lot of complexities there. I think officiating in the next 5 years is going to evolve to a point that is significantly greater than what it is now. But again, at the end of the day, we still have the final say of it. And as long as humans are involved in the decision making, there's going to be some inherent bias for battles for the lead. There's going to be some inherent bias for contact that has like results based impact, and versus some that the incident might be just as bad, but you don't lose anything from it. So that's my take on it. I think we're in for an exciting couple of years of evolution, both with officiating, scoring, penalty systems, live timing. There's a lot to look forward to.
Well, that brings me to my next point. We're in an exciting time. Obviously, at the CKNA Summer Nats, RaceSelect and CKNA kind of introduced the penalty point system, something that we've been talking about for a while, something that I think was needed in karting for a while. And so, before we kind of dive into how the first weekend kind of went, Keith, what's been the response like? Obviously, since its implementation, and then after now a weekend of really using it at a national event.
Yeah, I think the response was pretty positive at first. It's like we all kind of acknowledge something like this was needed, and so everybody was excited about it. And then you get the devil's in the details. There's like, well, I don't like this way. I don't like the way this works, and well, this doesn't make any sense. And when we first discussed this, it was like, there's no perfect way. We're not going to get it perfect on the first try. Greg Jasperson was very adamant of like, look, we can analyze this to death, but let's just put it out there and then get feedback. And so it's kind of what's happened, and so everyone made their opinions known. I would get calls from teams, complaining about something. I'm like, why are you calling me? Call Greg and tell him. You voice this concern and don't say this is unfair. Give concrete examples of why this doesn't work or shouldn't work this way. And so a lot of that feedback got kind of taken into account. And I think any moment now, it may already be up. I reviewed it with Greg today, the adjustments that were being made to the system after the first weekend. And one of the big adjustments for CKNA is, instead of the penalty points being directed at you as a driver for the whole weekend, we're slicing that across classes. So if you pick up a penalty in senior light, it doesn't affect you in senior medium. Now, that said, if you rack up enough penalty points to get yourself banned, then you're just a dumbass and you got banned, period. And it doesn't, I mean, it's frankly to hit the threshold where you're going to get banned,
It's a lot of
you got to
points.
do some egregious stuff.
Yeah.
To the point during the CKNA weekend, I knew like we'd have to hit 15 points before someone would get in trouble. And I hadn't even done the feature to notify the race director that someone had hit that. And then I looked late Saturday and I like ran to Chris Olds. I was like, oh my God, man, somebody's already hit the points threshold. I can't believe it. But, in the end, these things are good for the sport in general. One of the challenges the series have is when we have a bad actor, someone that we frankly, I wish this guy wouldn't race with us because he's nothing but trouble all the time. Just throwing a guy out is kind of hard. But if you lay out a pretty prescriptive, thing, like, look, here's your leash. Here's what, you're going to get in trouble if you do X, Y, and Z. It's a lot clearer for everybody. And so somebody who goes into CKNA Grands with 12 points on their record knows that they are one avoidable contact, one infraction away from throwing away their whole weekend. Because once you hit that 15-point threshold with CKNA, then you lose your next scored session. When you have 120 people in an event, if you lose a session, you might as well just pack it up and go home.
Yeah.
So I think that the reaction has been positive. There's been a lot of feedback. And the thing I love about Greg and the way he runs his series is he's very serious about customer feedback and making adjustments that are appropriate.
I agree. I think Greg has done a great job of kind of doing his best to hear out people. Obviously, when you're a series that's bringing in the most entries of any national series, it can get tough to kind of hear everybody out. And obviously, you're never going to please everybody. You know it. We know it, right? Like you said, like, you're going to have people that say, oh, it's not fair. No, it's not fair to you because you got bit by it because you wrecked somebody. So, yeah, it's not fair to you, but it's not fair to that guy that you just wrecked. And now you got 5 points, but he's also out of the race. So, to me, I think I know Emery's kind of searching for it. I think there was kind of a release about like 20 minutes ago that got posted that we're going to kind of bring up as well from CKNA. Kind of talking about.
Give me 2 seconds.
No, you're good. Yeah, just talking about kind of some of the updates. For me, it was all positive, right? Like you said, if you've racked up 15 points in a weekend, you probably deserved it. I think because I know you were one. We brought it up 2 weeks ago. and we kind of said on our show, listen, like this needs to be revised, that needs to be revised, maybe too many points for this, not enough points for that. How much of that has been kind of tweaked about? What are kind of the new, if any, like points situations
Yeah,
now?
there were some adjustments made to the amount of points that were applied to different things. But one of the key things, like that I advocated for and I thought was a good change, was almost like a on your insurance, like a safe driver discount. So there's a new adjustment to where if you set the cart on the ground for a new weekend, by going green, you're basically going to get some credit. It's going to knock 2 points off your previous thing. So someone can effectively race out of the penalty box with good behavior. Go to some races and stuff. And what we don't want is someone saying, you know what, I'm not going to run any of the regional races because it's too risky for me. That I might accrue penalty points before grands and put myself in jeopardy at grands. And so this was kind of an adjustment that helps deal with some of those things. There was other small adjustments, but I think the headline here is multi-class stuff. Instead of it being 15-25, it's 2 15-point penalties, puts you in purgatory, so to speak, a 6-month suspension. Or no, 6-month suspension is for unsportsmanlike conduct. But once you hit 15, you go back down to like 7 points or 8 points. And then if you hit 15 again, then you're going to get in real trouble. But we've looked at the history. CKNA has been using RaceSelect's penalty system for a couple years now. We looked closely at the history to make some of these decisions about what the thresholds were. And what we didn't want is for you to have just kind of some bad luck in a couple cases in a weekend and it really gets you in trouble. So, I mean, like when it comes to like contact penalties, for example, you'd have to get 4 contact penalties in order for it to actually like hit you, by causing you to miss a session. And when we survey people who've raced a lot of regionals with CKNA, most of them don't get penalties. That's the bottom line. If I charted all the data for you, there's a handful of outliers who get a lot of the penalties. But most drivers do not. Even top level drivers do not get many penalties. I mean, arguably one of the most successful drivers in CKNA history is Krith Warren. Go look at his penalty profile. Colin doesn't get many penalties. Colin's a very clean driver. You can do it and be a very clean driver. If you're constantly walking out of a weekend 10 plus points accrued, you need to look in the mirror. And part of this is about helping you hold up that mirror, helping you see what you're doing and changing behavior. And I hate to say it that way, changing behavior, but that's really what a lot of this is about. Is we've scared a lot of people off of karting. They don't like it. I talk to people all the time. I won't do karting anymore. It was too dirty. It's too this or that. Series get worried that if I ban a guy, like we're going to lose this guy's business. I don't want to do that. Everybody needs that business. But I think what a lot of them have come to the conclusion is for every time we lose a customer because this was a bad apple and a bad actor, we gain a few back who've left because of that behavior. And so I think in the long run, it's going to be good for all the different customers who do it. Right now, CKNA is doing it. TSRS released their information this past week. They have a completely different way that they're doing it. Same system, RaceSelect supports it, but what you get points for with them is different than what you get points for at CKNA. Every series operates it differently. And, this goes back to the genesis of this. And this wasn't something that CKNA just came up with on their own. This had been talked about for a long time. If you go back a few years ago to the national karting licensing system, that a lot of the different big series had agreed to. USPKS, SCUSA, Stars. Where that kind of failed a little bit was the way one series officiates things and the way they do things might be different than another. Just basic, human interaction of like how much we're going to let the shifters push each other and, bump and run type stuff might happen in one series and not the other. And that's kind of where it struggled. And it was really ironic. I had not really given a lot more thought to bringing this system back. And I got in the course of 1 hour, not kidding, 2 completely independent phone calls from 2 series directors saying, I want a penalty system. I want to curb this behavior. And so that's kind of where it came back from. And so you've got CKNA and TSRS both doing it right now. Several other series who use us have asked to, can we do this? Can we do that? So I think you'll very quickly see most all of the series adopt this in some way. Do I think there will be a national system where, if you screw up at SCUSA, then you're going to get penalized at USPKS? No, not officially. But I will tell you that the data is public. You can go right now to the CKNA page on RaceSelect, and you can see all the penalties that were issued. So if you show up because you've been banned at one series and you show up at another, I can't promise you that they're not going to look at that and say, look, man, you're on thin ice with us. We're not going to accept that kind of behavior. So that's one of the values of, I think, a lot of this being public.
I agree. So you guys offer obviously the penalty point system through RaceSelect, and series can adopt it, and they can kind of decide how they want to use it. Is that what I'm gathering here?
Yeah, absolutely. The threshold of points when you're banned, how many points each penalty are worth, what the probationary periods are, all of that stuff is up to the series. It's how they want to do it. So it's all configurable in that way. Some series may have a completely different implementation than others. It just happens that if you look at TSRS and CKNA, they're pretty close because a lot of times there's a right answer. You come to a similar conclusion to the same question. And so I think when we see potentially USPKS implement this in the future, I've been talking to Blake Hunt about it. I think we might see a different flavor on some of the things, especially the threshold at which people get in trouble is probably one of the malleable things. I think that we may see adjustments to where the expectation about drivers and their behavior is different per class. If you're in the X30 Pro class, I expect a certain level of racecraft out of you that a Microswift kid might not have that awareness yet. And so I think you'll see some adjustments like that in other series implementations.
Okay, but then that also then would beg the question of should we go to a universal scrutineering system? I mean, I know it's tough, and I know it's difficult to make series say, here's how we're going to do it, and we all need to agree to the same things. But I think then it opens the question of, okay, well, it goes back to the subjectivity part, right? Well,
Yep.
This series allowed this. You guys don't. You guys sometimes do. And it's like, it kind of all roads point back to it's not really black and white.
Yep.
What do you think is the fix? Is there a fix? At what point do we just go universal and say, here's how we do things?
I don't think you can go universal until you have a governing body over American karting, which I don't think we will at any time soon. I think there is a logical progression, and this is one of the things that made us uniquely suited to be able to do this. Is we're now at a point where the majority of national series, regional series, and large clubs are all on RaceSelect. So they're all on one system. So the idea that okay, we could get a step closer to that because all the data is in one place and it's all working together in kind of a harmonious way. It opens the door for that. But I do not believe we will go there because 4-cycle racing is very different than 2-cycle racing. And you don't have an equivalent of, what we allow in shifter, in 2-cycle racing versus what might happen in kid kart and in CKNA. There's a vast difference there. So I don't think we'll reconcile those differences anytime soon. And I don't necessarily think that we want to. I think let the customers decide by their decisions of where they're going to go, what series they're going to participate in. And I think what will happen is that series will see those valuable things and they will recognize it. It's just when the CKNA announcement came out, when the TSRS announcement came out, it caused other series to call and say, hey, we want to do this too because we think this is a good idea. We just didn't know it was an option right now. And so I think you're going to see that. Like Stars is the only big series that is not on RaceSelect. And I am quite certain that they have some level of this already internally. So if we all deem and recognize that this is a good thing for karting, the system actually doesn't matter. It's do we all implement it faithfully?
So I'm taking a look now at what TSRS kind of posted with their penalty system, and it looks as though there's a lot of crossover. Right? Like it's still 15 points you're excluded from the next official session. 25 points, disqualified from the remainder of the event. That seems pretty, so far, universal, right? We're 2 for 2,
Yep.
CKNA, TSRS. I look at it in the same way of like basketball, the technical foul, right? You get 1 tech at 15, you get 2 techs, you're out of here, right? That sort of thing. And then you scroll down the unsportsmanlike behavior. This is where things are pretty interesting, right? It says so minimum points, which I have to read into more what it means, but looks like it's 15 points for bad conduct. Obviously, any sort of physical altercation, 15 points immediate. That would basically essentially 15 points is essentially, you have to think of it as you're out of the next official event. And like you said earlier, if you miss an event, especially at like a large event like a CKNA race, even a TSRS race, you should probably pack it up and go home because your weekend's probably done if you miss a heat race or obviously a main. They have a lot of very low point systems, right? 0.1 points for things like improper chassis tag, engine seal, that sort of thing. Things that are human error. We don't really want to hurt you, but we're going to add some level of points to you. And obviously loss of battery, things like that, things that happen, but unfortunately we have to penalize you for because you get a penalty for it after the race. Those are 4 points. A lot of these are similar to CKNA, but obviously there's a lot more from what I'm reading in my very brief summary of what I just kind of paraphrasing everything. There's more to it, and I haven't gotten a chance to kind of, if there is an addition to what CKNA is kind of doing with their point system, if they've added more to the list, but there's quite a bit more that TSRS put on theirs.
CKNA hasn't added more. We adjusted some of the points there. One of the things that's unique about TSRS is that they have a close partnership with SCUSA. So their penalty infraction list comes from the SCUSA rulebook. And it delineates things differently based on when it may have occurred. A penalty affects you differently in qualifying or happy hour than it might during a heat race or something like that. And so it looks like a lot more because there's those delineations are in there. And this is part of the thing for us as a software development company, is that we didn't recognize that from the beginning. And so when I actually saw Brittany's draft, I was like, oh gosh, I didn't consider that. Maybe we should adjust the points on a session type basis. And so the development team has already implemented that, and we're going to bring that to the forefront for everybody. So it's a learning experience for all of us of like, what's the right way to do this and what's the way that makes it as easy as possible. Now, you mentioned in the verbiage a minimum of. One of the things that the race director has the right to do in any one of these cases is to override the default. So let's talk about a contact penalty. I may look at something, that was just they ran out of room, kind of made contact. You're going to get penalized for it. And then in some cases, contact is egregious and dangerous, and I may want to penalize you differently. So the system is malleable in the sense that when the race director or scoring person records a penalty, they can decide, you know what, this is not a 4-point penalty. I'm giving you 8 points for this because this was clear and egregious action on your part. Now, maybe it doesn't rise to unsportsmanlike conduct, but they have the right to override the system and set that. For the most part, they don't. In the same way that the penalty, for contact is a finish behind, they may decide to do something different. The penalty for this might be a loss of 3 seconds, but we may deem that this caused irreparable harm to another driver, and therefore we're going to decide to make you finish behind. Every single situation, the race director has the opportunity and option to do something like that. So that's probably why you saw that minimum language in there.
Yeah. One thing I want to touch on real quick is I was looking through the TSRS driver penalty points to this point, which obviously will be scrubbed before they officially implement this point system this weekend. But it sticks out to me that you have penalties that have the same kind of consequence, where it's like a 5-second penalty for the tire, or a 3-second penalty for scrubbing tires after the commit line, is the same penalty in time in seconds as a avoidable contact penalty, which also described as careless in there, which I thought was interesting lingo. but those penalties carry completely different penalty points weights. Whereas one is a 0.1 penalty point infraction, one is a 3-point infraction, and also unsafe re-entry is 4 points. Do you think that it's kind of like, what's your take on series that use your software kind of taking completely different approaches to penalty points versus timing or versus time penalties? Is that something that you expect to be more correlated over time, where they use the times to kind of base the penalty points off of, or vice versa? Or do you think it's kind of an acceptable thing to have such variance?
I think it's somewhat acceptable, but I think you're right. For the most part, there's going to be a strong correlation there. What you have to recognize is that in a lot of these cases, penalties and penalty points and times are a means of modifying behavior. And so unsafe reentry is a good example. For the most part, we don't think about that very often. But unsafe reentry may have been a pain point for a series recently, and they're really trying to lay down the law with the kids about this is what's acceptable and this is what's not. It is social engineering at some level, the way these are decided. And I think that just like USBK, or sorry, just like CKNA, I think Brittany will hear a lot of feedback this weekend from her teams and drivers and her own staff, and they will probably make some adjustments. So that might be a good one that people, if you think that's a mistake or that's egregious in one way, bring that up. But don't go like, this is what I tell people all the time. Don't go to a race director and complain about your kid and what happened to your kid, because now it's like you colored everything with bias. Bring a case that is empirical and clear and black and white about the system and this scenario. And I think that, anyone who thinks that, these need to be adjusted, I think that's your best case, is to make a clear case of this is going to hurt more than just one instance in one person.
I think I want to bring up what CKNA just posted. More so, there was one part that really intrigued me, and it goes back to what we talked about at the start of the show. The Colin Warren incident in CKNA in the Summer Nats for senior medium in the main event. Again, I don't have the clip for it just because I didn't get the good. We didn't have a good enough angle of what happened. I don't want to clip something and paint the wrong picture. But there's a lot of instances this past weekend, more so than what I've seen in the past, of drivers getting the black and white flag, the sportsmanship flag, and kind of being given the sign from Jason Burgess of blank cart behind blank cart, right? In Colin Warren's case, it was, I think, the 11 behind the 48. Now, looking at this new release, it says CKNA will no longer be using this flag at any event. Talk about the sportsmanship flag. If a driver on their own decides to give positions back because they feel they may have gotten a penalty, it will be at the sole discretion of the race director to consider that penalty as served on track, quote unquote. If the race director makes a decision, the driver will still receive penalty points, but the amounts will be cut in half. There's a lot that we could dive into there. First and foremost, I think I'm on the team, and I said this to Emery, I've said it to Caleb when we were there this weekend, where I was personally I'm a fan of this. I was not a big fan of the serve on track penalties. And my reasoning behind it is it goes back to the situation of, well, we're getting better at finding the penalties that were given to guys 20th on back, but we're not there yet. And to me, when you look at the sportsmanship flags that were given, a lot of it was given to guys running up front, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then it actually does kind of lean into the that's not fair argument. I still don't love that. I hate when people say that's not fair because, well, that's life, right? That's racing. Life's not fair. Racing oftentimes is not a very fair sport for some people, right? Someone's always going to get burned more than others. I want to, first of all, Keith, get your take on, obviously Eli was racing this weekend. I don't think he got a black and white flag during the Summer Nats, but you guys have seen it. You guys have been a part of it. Did you like it? Do you not like it? Do you like this call to not do it anymore?
Yeah, this was under a lot of discussion during the weekend as well, because the determination of whether something is served on track can be somewhat ambiguous. And there was a lot of people, like I had multiple people come up to me and say, well, hey, I served it on track, but they didn't notice and I still got the penalty. So there's some tough stuff there. But, a scenario that we kicked around a little bit when discussing this was simply making the decision to serve it on track may not be the whole picture. So let's say Eli and Emery are out there and they're racing for position, and Eli gets into Emery and they both spin off the track. They both get on there and Eli makes sure Emery goes ahead of him. So he's served it on track. He gave back the position. Okay. But Emery goes a half a lap and realizes he can't continue because his tire rod's bent, his axle's bent now. Eli passes him, goes on, sails off into the sunset. Is that fair in that circumstance that he, quote, served it on track by going behind Emery for a moment, but Emery couldn't continue? So there's so many scenarios where this can get tricky that kind of leaving it to the race director to make that decision of whether this was fair to be served on track or not, it ended up being the right decision. This was also something that, like, if we're trying to control behavior, if we're trying to curb bad behavior, if I can just clean Emery out in turn 8 at GoPro and then fall behind him and be, no big deal, I fell behind him, what's to keep people from taking advantage of that? So we decided there needed to still be at some level a penalty for it. Now, most of the time, if I go into that corner and I cause Emery and I to wreck, I feel bad. I want to give him back that spot. That's a gentlemanly thing to do. But there's still repercussions from my action. There should be. Maybe it's not 4 points at that point. Maybe it's only 2. So this is kind of where this comes from, is trying to be as fair to the situation as possible.
Emery, I think you'll probably have a couple things to say about this. I can think of a couple of examples already. I know you've been a part of one. I want to hear what your take is.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to, like, if you get in a car wreck with someone, if someone drives straight into you, they can give you a cupcake afterwards. They can hand you $100 bill. It's not going to come close to paying off the repercussions. And I think it's enough for minor incidents, for minor discrepancies. This weekend was a perfect example, actually. Travis Pettit blending into line in Heat 1 of the KA Junior race this weekend.
I
eventually kind of
if this didn't get posted pretty much mid-show, I think, right, Emery?
Yeah.
I would have had
the perfect example.
Yeah, I would have had the Travis Pettit clip ready, but just for reference for what Emery's about to talk about, Quaker City this past weekend, Travis Pettit, the 4 stars put the barriers between the turn 1 cut through and what was the entry to turn number 6. Got moved wide a little bit, took the cut through, had a major lead on the field. Then we spoke about it in the morning show, very maturely made the executive decision to, well, I can't do what I just did. And he kind of self-penalized himself to what, 9th, I think it was? So with that, Stars did not give him a penalty because they deemed it served on the racetrack. I think that kind of was an interesting discussion, but I think it was one of the situations where he found a gray area in the rules. And from there, Stars said, you know what, we're going to put barriers in between it to not even allow this. Continue your point.
And the second example of this, also this weekend, Enzo Vidmontien gets in a crash with Jared Cork in the final from about 9th on the track. And Cork falls, I think it was 17th or so. Enzo cuts the track from turn 8 into the other half of the track and then gives up places until where he was at. The officials afterwards gave him a 5-second penalty for leaving the track, gaining an advantage, or cutting the track, or whatever the Stars penalty for that infraction is technically called. But either way, when you leave it up to the driver's hands, sometimes they correctly penalize themselves. Sometimes they over-penalize themselves. I'm not going to sit here and say that drivers can't self-police. I think it's actually in minor instances is a good thing. I think in avoidable contact cases where someone has created a massive incident, they can try to, but it shouldn't have any serious bearing on the actual consequence of the race, because again, if you drive into the back of me at the hairpin of Trackhouse or vice versa, I drive into you, Alex, and we both crash out of the race. If we were first and second, we both fall down to 35th and 40th, and I've cleaned out 2 go-karts. If I let you go and then you pull into the pits, to Keith's point, what difference does it make? So again, it kind of goes back to the original point I made a while ago about
AJ.
about you have to look at it like process based as opposed to results based penalties. But I also think with that, I'm not going to say you can't just say, oh, like drivers can't self police, because that'd be kind of authoritarian in a sense. But I do think that you have to kind of look at driver self policing in a little bit of a sort of mitigated sense. Like certain things, Pettit's case, good, but you can't rely on that. Enzo deciding to cut the track and lose 1 spot from it is an example of one where, like, okay, you can't just say just because the driver gave back spots on the reentry doesn't mean that fit the consequence of it. So I don't know. I think it's a tricky discussion to have. It's much more tricky, in my opinion, than actual like officiating decisions. I think that the sportsmanship flag was not the best implemented thing because, again, you're relying on spot on officiating mid race for that to be the case. And as we all know, there's a lot of gray area in officiating mid race. So I don't know. I think that driver self-policing is something that's cool to see in the sport, but it shouldn't be relied on. And mid-race officiating and forcing drivers to give up a position should only be done if you're absolutely certain about the merits of a penalty.
Yes.
And in 90% of the cases, that's not the case until it's far too late into the race.
Well, I think the reality is that the served on track is probably going to be more applicable to stuff like passing under yellow than it is contact penalties in a lot of cases. I've seen a lot of cases where a driver begins a pass, gets the pass executed, and realizes, oh shit, we were under yellow, and immediately points the other guy by. I think that's the stuff that's going to be like, all right, that's a fair served on track penalty, no points. But it's going to have to be a pretty interesting circumstance, I think, for the race directors to say, this contact penalty, we're going to allow to be served on track with no repercussions.
I think something else to note on this, still on our screen here, is another thing that CKNA kind of put out, and that was again just trying to root out negative behavior. Retaliation now increased to 15 points, which is basically an automatic DQ from the next official session. Again, probably a weekend ruiner if you're at a CKNA event, especially the Grand Nationals. I think that's a good call. Retaliation, it should never be a thing, no matter how upset you are at what just occurred. And the other one is unsportsmanlike conduct is now an automatic DQ and suspension for a minimum of 6 months. I believe that was from 15 points. I think unsportsmanlike conduct was 15. Now it is an automatic DQ and suspension. So, and just for clarification, Keith, that is an automatic DQ from the weekend or automatic DQ?
Yep.
Okay.
See you 6 months from now. Doesn't matter the circumstance. I think that the reality is it takes a lot to rise to that level. If you get heated in a scale line and as long as nobody touches anybody, people blow off steam. That's probably not going to get you an unsportsmanlike call. But unfortunately, what we saw in the Overbeck and Palladino incident, it's like some things just cross a line, and we have to stop that kind of behavior. There's a lot of circumstances that cause different things, but taking someone else's equipment and flipping it over like that is that's not cool, not called for. And I think the series, made a right decision there. I feel bad that Nikki's going to miss grands and stuff, but that we can't allow some of that stuff. I
guess you kind of touched on it. It takes a lot to rise to the level of unsportsmanlike conduct. To me, I've always seen that as a bit subjective because I've seen guys in other series get unsportsmanlike conduct penalties for flipping someone off, right?
Yeah.
Or for taking maybe no physical contact, but they take a scale line argument a little too far. How do you compare that to an incident like a Palladino Overbeck incident or like something where there's no line that's crossed. It's just absolutely like driven through.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad I'm not a race director. That's why I'm glad I'm not in that situation, because those are tough calls. I think back to, in the past year, what have been the circumstances that I've seen that were clear and obvious unsportsmanlike conduct that should result in that. And the only other incident I can come up with in my mind is from the end of, I think, senior medium at Grands last year. We had a driver park the cart in the kid cart cut through, wait for another competitor, and then gun it and ram that competitor after the race. It's like, that was like, I don't know who it was. I remember seeing it thinking, did that just really happen? Did I just witness that? And so it's those kinds of things that are going to be the clear and obvious, this is unsportsmanlike conduct. Throwing punches in the scale on, probably going to rise to that occasion. And we saw some stuff at Route a couple weekends ago where there's a lot of yelling in the scale on, people getting in each other's faces. Does that rise to it? That's the call of the race director there. In the series too, the series have different personas. Route is a very family friendly series. You don't want that kind of stuff in certain circumstances where I think some other series might look at that heat of the moment, biggest race of the year, something really bad happens. Let's give him a little breathing room. So I think this is, again, subjective, and I'm not a race director. Sorry.
So I'm gonna throw this on Alex then, real quick, because I kind of miss on Keith. In your opinion, Gavin Bailiff, in the final, has an incident with Andrew Budosa. We clipped it live.
I was gonna get into that because I've seen in the past, and I know of people that have given somebody the "you're number one" sign and been given unsportsmanlike penalty. And obviously, if you don't know what the "you're number one" is, I'm not going to show you, but you can kind of understand where I'm going with that, right? For me, listen, like I don't know. It's kind of a nothing situation for me. Like, I'm not gonna sit there and act like, go out there and give somebody the bird because you just are upset with them. If you're Gavin Bailiff, you just got wrecked out of a main that you probably had the pace to go out there and maybe win. I'm not gonna sit here and act like that should happen, but
It's life.
it happened, and you can't sit there and think like, oh man, get that guy off the racetrack. No, he just got wrecked out of a potential win from Pro Shifter.
But like, what do you call it?
You're gonna have emotions, but then it leads to the next point, right? This is where, like he said, I don't want to be a race director ever, because this pretty much negates the entire thing we've talked about for this whole show, which is how do we make officiating black and white? How do we get rid of the subjectivity of it all? And then here I am saying, for unsportsmanlike conduct, well, it's subjective and deal with it.
Well,
right?
I think even more than that, though. Like, if we're saying unsportsmanlike conduct carries a minimum 6-month suspension, and it takes a lot to rise to the level of unsportsmanlike conduct, then what do you call flipping someone off for an instant, or flipping someone off for a whole lap, or like?
I think what this is going to lead to eventually is like what TSRS has done, which is put in a minimum points penalty. And I think that unsportsmanlike conduct should probably turn into a minimum penalty situation of, here's the minimum and here's the maximum. And the maximum should be DQ, suspension 6 months. But the minimum could also be, minimum is, I don't want to sit here and put a number out there, but minimum is you flip somebody off X amount of points, right? But like, I'm not going to sit and act like, man, you flip somebody off, I don't want to ever see you at the racetrack again. See you in 6 months, especially for somebody who's not a repeat offender, right? For somebody who's in the heat of a moment, doing something that is unharmful to anybody, right? It is, you could be offended of it, but he's not actually saying anything to you. He's not causing any physical harm. It is a heat of the moment situation, right? And so for me, it is unsportsmanlike. I'm not going to sit and act like it is not unsportsmanlike. You look at the NFL, right? They had an epidemic of they've kind of gone back on it, but like, you couldn't even celebrate a touchdown a couple years ago. Right now, they've gotten better at it, but in the NFL or in the NBA, you can't do anything that is anything even verbal or a middle finger, right? Because they're going to give you a tech if you're in the NBA. So there should be something, probably, like some level of a slap on the wrist that makes you be like, that was kind of stupid on my part, right? Maybe a time penalty, maybe something. But
well, see, I think this is why it's important, and this is why I don't think we'll see a national consistent system across the board. It's different series are going to want to treat that differently. I know Chris Kardashian at Route 66 takes that very seriously. He thinks that it's kind of broken windows theory with New York in the 90s of like you have to police the really small crimes in order to change the behavior that ultimately affect the bigger crimes. And so it's very important to him. Whereas another series on USPKS might be like, who cares? I don't know the way all the series are going to fall on this, but that's why I think it was important to design a system for all of them that allows them to adjust that to the flavor of how they want to run their series.
With that, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Keith, you're staying on here. We'll come back. We'll talk about
Okay.
Live timing. We'll talk about a couple more things. We're going to have some call-ins. I don't know if you saw, we made a post a couple days ago, yesterday, actually talking about, what are your opinions on the penalty system? We got a couple call-ins. I want you to hear those.
Okay.
But obviously, first, we got to kind of play a commercial here. Got to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Absolutely.
Are you looking to take the next step in your racing journey? Well, look no further than PitFit.
With 2 locations in Charlotte, North Carolina and Indianapolis, Indiana, PitFit trains drivers all the way from grassroots level karting to IndyCar and NASCAR with top-of-the-line personalized coaching to improve physical and cognitive fitness.
For more information on programs, check out PitFit on Instagram or Facebook today.
Hey, what's up, Caleb?
What's up, Brandon?
You sound defeated. A long day at the office?
Yeah, got stuck at a cat food marketing meeting for like 3 hours. I don't know a thing about cat food, and I don't even work in marketing. And then I got sent on a coffee run like I was some sort of intern. Then at the end of the day, when I want to go get gas, I just realized everything is so darn expensive nowadays, man.
Yeah, you got that right.
Like, do you have any idea how much we're spending on Netflix?
That's like $20 a month.
Do you know how much we're spending on cable?
That's like $50 a month.
And you know what isn't expensive?
Tell me.
Kart Chaser Premium. For only $9.99 a month, you can watch all the American karting action live from coast to coast. Subscribe and become a member today.
DPK Americas is bridging the gap between the U.S. and the 2-time world champion DPK Alonso Kart factory team.
Welcome back here to KC Grid Talk, episode number 57. We've had Krith Warren on for a while now, but Keith, we've talked a lot about your penalties point system. We've talked a lot about kind of RaceSelect, kind of bridging the gap for series and kind of making opportunity for them to clean up the officiating side of things and keep making it easier for people to track. But let's hear a little bit more about RaceSelect as a whole. I want you to take us through kind of the origin of RaceSelect and what started the company as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. It was probably 4.5 years ago. I tried to use one of the other registration systems that had been around for a long time, and I'm a pretty sophisticated internet user. I own a software company. This is what I do for a living, and I remember going through that process thinking this is horrid. And I went to Greg Jasperson and I was like, man, let me build you something better that is just easier for customers to use to register for races. And so CKNA was our first customer, and that was really, to me, all it was ever going to be. It was just going to be, I was going to do this for CKNA, and I would be happy to have made a better experience for everybody. And then about 2 years later, I saw what Chris Kardashian was doing with Route 66. I reached out to him, and honest to God, I think I talked to Chris on a Thursday, and other series knew that this was out there, this was an option. Once I think he had told someone, so by the next day, USPKS had signed on. WKA the next day. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And so it's been a wild ride. The things that I expected people would care about are not really what they care about. So, as we go through this kind of process in those past few years, I thought they would care about live timing software. They would care about, all these other things that I thought were cool. But that's not what the series really cared about. The series, everyone looks at the series a lot. And this really bothers me now that I've kind of been on the inside and seen it. Like, oh, it's a money grab. These guys are trying to make all this money. The series don't make near as much money as you think. The series, a lot of these guys are doing it because they love the sport and they want to do something great in the sport. And they believe that they can do it better. So a lot of what the series need is, how do we do this in a less expensive way? How do we reduce the need for someone to go do this part or that part? Staffing is a big part of the cost. And so how can we make that experience better? That's what they've cared about. So a lot of what we've seen now lately with the penalty system was born of that. Like it actually started with the process of pushback bumper penalties. Gosh, we get so many pushback bumper penalties and we have to write this down on a piece of paper and we have to call it up to scoring. How can we make that a little bit better? And so every one of these features that we've ended up having have been born of, how do we make it a little easier for the series and for the customer? And so that's kind of where we got to this point. And kind of, I remember actually that weekend that I let the second customer on the system. I was driving home. Eli and I had actually went to the Corvette plant for his first time driving a car. He drove a Miata that weekend. We were driving home from that, and I was telling him about my weekend. And I told him, you know what, man, we've got, I think USPKS is signed on. We've got WKA now. Wouldn't it be incredible if one day we got SCUSA? And so earlier this week, I think just yesterday, SCUSA announced that they are moving to RaceSelect. So that was a big full circle moment for me, like to finally have kind of climbed that mountain and achieved what I wanted with the software. And now we're actually getting to the point that most of what the series care about has been achieved. And we can start to turn our attention to the things that I think are cool. So, for example, I am annoyed by Race Monitor. I am even more annoyed by SpeedHive. Race Hero was pretty good. I was like, when we lost Race Hero last year, I think the entire karting community kind of let out a collective, like, disappointing sigh. Like, really? Now we have to use these other things? And so when I first heard that we were going to lose Race Hero as a solution, I immediately sprang into action, put my development team together. We had actually prototyped something a couple of years ago. So was it going to take to resurrect this? And when the announcement came out, we did a post and told the karting community writ large, like, we're going to have a solution. We're going to build something even better than Race Hero was to replace Race Hero. And it's going to be freely available to tracks to use. If you're a series that runs RaceSelect, it'll be even better, kind of thing. And so once we kind of hit that full circle, and now we're getting to actually play with and do the cool stuff, the things that I care about in karting, I'm excited. I'm really excited because there's so many things that people don't realize about this sport and how it works. And I think you're showing some of the screenshots on there now, is that we just wanted a better experience. And to me, it was very personal because I am like a lot of other guys who are listening right now. I spend my weekends standing on a fence line, holding a phone in my hand, watching Eli on the track with one eye and watching the phone with the other, and using a live timing app for something that's very important to me. And that it didn't do what I wanted it to do, that it took forever to do certain things, was very frustrating to me. So we set out to build something that solved a lot of those problems. And so, like, as you're looking at it right now, you can click in, you can drill in on stuff, but just on this screen alone, there's a couple of things that are interesting. We all know what a purple lap is, but a purple lap in a lot of cases can make you make decisions that are probably invalid. Especially in 206 racing or KA racing, someone can throw down this absolute flyer that was just, they timed the suck just right. And so you come in and you throw your helmet down and you're frustrated, like, oh, we're 7/10 off pace, man. This is ridiculous. And you're going to make a bunch of changes to your kart and your motor because you think you're 7/10 off. But the reality is one guy threw one crazy lap that was 4/10 faster than the rest of the field. You're really only about 3/10 off the second fastest lap. And if you actually average it out, you're probably only about a quarter second off. If I know I'm a quarter second off, I am making drastically different decisions about setup and changes than if I'm 7/10 or a second off. And so when you look at that, you see the purple lap, but that gold lap right there is another interesting indicator. And I think this will become popular in more and more timing systems. It's your best 3-lap average. It is a much more realistic representation of your performance on the track right now. So we have the gold lap thing. One of the things we see a lot is that when Eli will come off the track, or most everybody I see will do this, they'll pull up Race Monitor, they'll click back 4 or 5 times to try to get the results, pull up the results, click the button to cause it to resort by fastest lap. You don't have to do that. If you look on that left side under position 1, under position 2, you see S1 or S5 or S3. That's your speed ranking. At any given time, you can tell where am I at on speed and what's my position on the track. So there's just lots of little subtle things like that that we've built into the app. One of the biggest complaints I have, for example, about SpeedHive is that when I'm holding my phone in portrait mode, which is what 99% of non-psychotic people do when they're looking at a timing app, it cuts the names off. Like I can't tell who most of these people are. So just little things like that. One of the things that we run into a lot is, what do people do when they come back to the pits? What do they do with this data? And oftentimes people will ask the question, did I get faster or did the track get faster? And so you can answer that. You can go in and you can look at your time and your time in the last session, and then you can go pick a couple other of your competitors and see what their time was in that session. And so this process takes you 2 or 3 minutes to kind of figure this out. We're just going to answer that question right off the jump. We're just going to show you right away. Did you get faster relative to the field? The field improved on average 1/10.5, but you improved 2.5 tenths. So your net positive gain was 1/10. The screen you're showing right now, how we navigate from the screen that we're on to other screens. I tracked myself in Race Monitor, and it was usually about 7 clicks on the phone to get back from live to the result from something. And so we just wanted to make that super simple, 1 click to be able to jump back to what you want to see. So that's what we're focused on, is making the experience for the guy using it at the track a lot better, answering the questions that they have without having them to hunt and peck and go all around and try to find this information somewhere else.
You just saved Emery a lot of time, because if there's anybody that I know more than most that does exactly what you just said, it's Emery. On a single weekend, he'll be in the production booth, giving us in the announcer's booth all the information of this guy did this guy improved this much. And it takes him a long time to do that.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
so cool.
I'm really excited to get this in people's hands, because I don't think it's a clone of Race Hero. We went back and forth a lot on the user interface, how it looks. And most people will look at it and say, oh, it looks like they just remade Race Hero. Not really. We went through a lot of stuff, and ultimately we decided that was just a better interface and people were comfortable with it. And so we wanted to kind of align with that at some level. But as you dig in and you kind of click on a driver and you start to see stuff, like one of the things that we do that I'll admit, this wasn't my creation. We were what we call vibe coding this. We were using AI to help us code. And we asked the AI at one point, what would you add? And the AI said, I would add a heads up mode, so you can compare yourself and your stats with another driver from that session. So that's one of the features we added. You can go in, you can click on Eli's name, and then you can pick someone else from the race. You can pick Ryan Norberg and actually see a side-by-side comparison of the statistics that we float to the surface about lap times, average lap times, positions gained, stuff like that. So I'm excited because of stuff like that, but I'm also excited to get this into the hands of racers and have them come up to me at the track and say, I wish it did this. Can it do this? Because for the longest time, we've been held captive by people who I don't think ever go to the racetrack. Like, this is what I do for a living. I own a software company. We do this for lots of people. When we first sat down to look at this problem, it took me about 10 minutes to realize no one who is writing the code for these apps actually is a racer who goes to the track. Like, there's no possible way they are, because they wouldn't let this stand. And so that's what I'm excited about, is people.
You can't get a hold of them.
No, absolutely. And so I'm excited for people to come up and say, I wish it did this, or I wish it didn't do this. One of the little things, like as we thought about teams, what do teams care about? If you're Ron Perry, do you care about 45 drivers, or do you care about the 5 mini drivers who are under your tent? So simply being able to go in and pin those drivers and say, this weekend, this is what I care about these. I want to see those at the top and then everybody else. He doesn't have to go scrolling up and down looking for his drivers. Where are they? They're always going to be locked to the top, and then he can see the rest of the race. Those things, to some drivers and one dad, it might not be that big a deal, but to a coach or something like that who's got a lot of guys to look at, that's incredibly valuable. I think a lot, I know I'm rambling here, but I think a lot about Supernats. And by the time I come off track with Eli, we put him on the car stand, we push back to the tent, we catch our breath. We've got maybe 25 minutes before we have to turn around and push back up to grid, depending on how far away you are. Those seconds are valuable, every one of them. So if I can give you as a racer, as a team, back 30 seconds, you can get more answers, but you get 30 seconds back because you weren't clicking around. That's incredibly valuable time at a big race like Supernats.
Absolutely. I mean, first off, when I heard some of this, and we talked about it a little bit back in Newcastle a couple of weeks ago, and then obviously I had a chance to look at the screenshots before the episode, I was like, this is a big step in the right direction. And it's not just something that as an individual driver, like I've personally like, because I mean, a lot of people know at this point, I am very much into the data side of things. I've, I'll even say last week when we were in the run up to stars, I was thinking, how cool would it be if I could create a betting model through ChatGPT based off of shifter lap time data? And so my night project one night was to go through Excel, create 3, 5, and best lap averages for each of the shifter drivers, each of the King of the Castle sessions, and convert it into kind of AI to give me like a converted betting model based off of who's got the best, long run averages, who's got the best single lap averages, what have you. To have all that data accessible without having to go through 3 different things of Excel, bring it into ChatGPT, do all this stuff is extremely nice. And I've had conversations with multiple people who are in every facet of the sport. You're talking parents, you're talking mechanics, you're talking driver coaches, drivers themselves. And at least among people that I would say have a wide view of the industry and have a wide view of things outside of the industry, the biggest thing that karting as a sport lacks at the moment is data.
Yeah.
There's not a historical archive. There's not enough live data. And so seeing stuff like this is a huge step forward.
We are working on building the historical archive. I wish I would have anticipated and had more time before Race Hero kind of rolled up to capture a lot of their data. But a lot of data is available in SpeedHive. We've got a lot of historical data. One of the things that this is one of those things that I'm going to do because I think this is the right thing and this is the future. And it probably will get used by virtually no one except Emery. But we're actually going to attach an MCP server to the data beyond this so that you can connect ChatGPT and actually ask ChatGPT questions. And it will, instead of just randomly trying to find stuff on the internet, it will have first class access to this data and can do that stuff for you. So if you have a novel question, you'll be able to ask an AI model. The AI model will be able to talk to RaceSelect and be able to do the kinds of things that it needs to do in order to come up with the correct answer. So I'm excited about things like that too. I know we have a lot of places that we're integrating AI into RaceSelect as even part of the consumer product. I think we are less than a year, probably even less than 6 months away from you being able to register for an event on RaceSelect without ever using your phone. Just tell ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, register me for the race coming up, and it will know what to do. So yeah, there's exciting times coming. We're doing some fun stuff, and that's I'm kind of thrilled with the direction of the company right now and how things are going. We're a karting first company. This was never built to be a car thing. It was not built for anything but American sprint karting. So we get inquiries all the time from Europe. Are you doing this in Europe yet? Can we do this in South America? And the thing I tell people over and over is that RaceSelect was built for one thing and one thing only: American sprint karting and the way we race here in America, the way we do things. If you can adapt to that, then we can talk. But right now, that's what we care about, and we will continue to care about for some time.
Yeah, I want to ask about taking a step back from just RaceSelect and looking at, LLM models, AI, what have you. If you're looking at karting in America in the coming years, how do you feel like we can leverage AI to continue kind of building an advantage within the sport beyond? We've already talked about the race, like kind of the sort of interface side of things, but taking it a step further.
Yeah, we're already seeing a couple products. Like, we actually started to do one probably in the ChatGPT 3 era when the APIs first came out. And I just didn't think that the answers were clear enough. And that was on, like, I am a neophyte. I'm terrible at this. Eli's been racing now for 6 or 7 years. And, like, we will be under the tent and Josh will come by and say, like, add a couple clicks of camber or caster. And I actually have to turn around and Google it. Like, what does he mean? So I'm terrible at it. And I think there's a lot of other people that are that way that could really benefit from simply asking ChatGPT, what do I do in this situation? And so we played with doing something like that. But there's Kart Class in Australia has something similar. There's a couple products that have popped up here in the US on the app stores that kind of do the same thing. And it really is a game of providing context. The more information we can provide the models, the better. I played with what up until this week was considered the current state-of-the-art model, O3 Pro from OpenAI. And I asked it before, I think it was before the Stars race. I gave it a lot of information about the last kart, and it started asking me questions I'd never considered. It really tried to build a context profile of what was going on. And then this is where I really had the oh wow moment. It asked me to export all of my data from Race Studio, and it gave me a very specific format that it wanted it in. Because if you give it to me in this format, then I can understand it. And we gave it that, and it really understood a lot of what a great data guy, like Smiles at BJR, can sit with one of the kids and tell him, you're making a mistake here. ChatGPT was doing that with the data alone. And so I think that that's where we're going to start to see it come is if we can unlock the context, if we can unlock the data in real time to give to the LLMs, it's going to make a monumental impact. And I've talked to a number of big time drivers about this. Like, this is coming. This is coming sooner than you think. The problem is right now, if I just give it Eli's data, I don't know what changes we made. Because I didn't write down, like, between session 3 and 4 of this practice day, we did this air pressure and we made this tweak to the carb, et cetera, et cetera. The more information we give it, the better and the smarter it will get over time. So that's really going to be the key in the next few years, is unlocking the data that's in these kind of proprietary silos. It's been very difficult. I've tried for a couple of years. I even went to AIM at PRI 2 years ago and said, I want an iPhone app. I want to be able to look at my Micron data on an iPhone. They're, oh, we're working on it. I was like, yes, I saw the post in the forum 3 years ago that you were working on it. My company will build it for free if you will just give me access to the APIs. No, we're working on it. Still to this day, there's nothing out there. So that's really the blocker right now, is getting access to the kind of data we need in order to unlock value in it.
Yeah. Data in karting, it's out there. There is a world where we have a fully built historical archive of karting results, and you can replicate what we see on the NASCAR side of things, on the F1 side of things, on data traces, where you can come off the track and instantly have immediate publicly available data. There's first off a business there, I think, that is a bit untapped, that I'm not going to say AIM has had a monopoly on the data side of the sport for the last 2 decades, but it's kind of true. Yeah. And I think it's a matter of time before that changes. But
one of the interesting things, Emory, F4, the US F4 championship, everyone gets access to the leaders' data. If you go out and you set fast time in practice, your data is publicly shared with everybody. So what would that do to karting? How, what if someone made a rule that? I actually think there's going to be a little bit of whiplash here. I do believe in the next few years, a series or a new series will come along that goes the opposite direction, especially as we see more and more AI begin to get involved in some of these things and tuning the engine and tuning the kart. I think a series is going to come along and say, you can only run this series and there is no microns allowed. There is no AI allowed or anything like that. It is man and machine. I think that there's going to be a lot of different directions this goes.
Absolutely. I think at the end of the day, you have to give people what they want to some degree. And ultimately, there's going to be a segment of karting that still to this day likes things the traditional way, doesn't look at data. There's been a couple different X30 Pro guys, shifter guys that I've talked to over the years that straight up have said, yeah, I couldn't tell you anything about data. I just go out there and drive. And they can be successful. And there's another segment of people that are like, yeah, like I do not want to like have to come in every single session and look at my data traces for 10 minutes or even look at GoPro, you know?
Yeah.
So there's always going to be that level of kind of evolution and reverse evolution in a sense, where the more that things kind of converge towards a data centric sport, there's going to be an alternate solution out there that kind of dials things back a decade. There's room for both, in my opinion. But man, Alex, I find this whole thing extremely fascinating. And Chase Gasly talking about keeping the Einstein of karting. I mean, I think it's cool to have different sort of different evolutions of technology in modern karting, because really everyone says that we're kind of the bare bones sport of Formula racing, right? You look all the way at the top of innovation. Formula One has innovation technology that stems all the way into the car manufacturer world, military world, various different forms of transportation, et cetera, all the way down. When we're pushing the boundaries, I think it speaks a lot for the sport and where the sport could end up. And both on the broadcast side, on the selfish side, on the kart chaser side, you know, I can't speak to everything we've done on the back end, but I feel like we've made more progress in the last 6 months in terms of, even if everything isn't at the forefront now, even if everything isn't being kind of like shown outward to the public, there's a lot of back end stuff that's constantly evolving, constantly changing. And the more that we can tap into that, the better the product, the better the sport's going to become. And hey, I mean, I'm not going to say 5 years from now, like it's going to be a fully tapped into industry with AI. I still think there's going to be hold up. There's going to be people that like the more traditional route, but I mean, it's a really interesting time to be in the sport of karting, seeing all this innovation.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
it's one of those things where it's super easy to get complacent, right? In a sport that has remained stagnant for so long, that now in the last 5 years, I've seen more growth in the sport than when I was born, right? Up until when I started karting when I was 7 until 2020, it was the exact same sport. Nothing changed. I went to the track every single weekend, Homestead, Orlando, Ocala, RIP, and nothing was different. And then kind of Kart Chaser came along, and then all of a sudden more and more innovations being made. The series are starting to really listen to the drivers more than I've ever seen. RaceSelect now really listening to the drivers, because I think it was, like Emery said, an untapped market of a big issue. A big issue of, it's the same way as like you'd want your engine builder to be on site. You want the guys controlling the live timing, preferably to be on site or be accessible. And I think in certain situations, right, like you said, Race Hero was probably the most used and probably the most loved of all the live timings, if you compare it to like the big three of like Race Monitor, Speed Hive, Race Hero. Obviously Alpha now has gotten pretty good, and they're I think at this point the best of what's most commonly used. But again, nothing solved the issue of how do I expedite the process? How do I save myself 20 minutes of, if you really want to use live timing for your own benefit, right? Because yeah, anybody can come into pits and say, "Oh, I was 7th." Okay, cool. It doesn't do anything besides boost an ego or ruin your day, right? But now it's like, okay, actually, I'm not that slow anymore. Emery?
I was gonna say, I have a perfect example of this. At USPKS, we came in for a second practice session, and I was 6th overall. I was within 500s of, let's see, it was Lemke, it was Pauly, it was myself, it was Caleb. There's one other person in the top 6. I think it was Blake. At the time, everyone was within like 700s. The whole field was so close. I went through, I looked at all the data. By the time I had like spent my 30 minutes going through all the horrible UI of Speed Hive, I was eventually able to come to a consensus of Lemke's like here, Caleb's like here, Pauly's like here. Everyone else that's in that group is like here. The rest of that weekend followed pretty closely. I'd Overbeck come in eventually and make it in, but way outside of the like best lap or even like what is outwardly facing on Speed Hive, you can find trends in the data that will tell you how the result's going to end up playing out. Same thing goes for X30 or shifter sessions. You can tell a lot in a weekend in the practice sessions that do not show up on the fastest time. And it all comes down to what data is readily available. And I think that's, if we can talk all the AI stuff, all of the kind of like, I guess, medium term future sort of innovations and whatnot. But in the short term, the UI being more accessible, the amount of data that's available right within 2 or 3 clicks of a button, for you, that makes that data so much easier to understand as maybe a casual karting parent that doesn't really like look into the nitty gritty. But now suddenly, they won't get false implications of, hey, my kid was 4th on the timing sheet within a 10th of Brandon Lemke, but really he needs to find about 3/10 on average. Or someone, or a team owner coming in that is looking at 6 different sessions at a time, looking at, hey, these 2 kids under my tent, maybe one of them's 3rd, one of them's 9th, but the kid that's in 3rd really has a lot to develop on. And the kid that's in 9th should be used as kind of the reference data and the reference setup. Those sorts of innovations are going to have a huge impact, I think, that a lot of people don't even realize. I think if I'm looking at the kind of customer facing view of that, that's what I'm most excited for.
Yeah, and I think we've all learned from politics, you can make data lie any way you want. And so it will reinforce your own biases. And part of this is about tearing that down, about letting you see data in a way you hadn't thought about looking at it, that helps you understand what's really going on the track. But there's other subtle things that were always annoying to me. This is why I believe no one who's actually working on these apps actually ever goes to the track. It is the most annoying thing to me to pull it up and then have to scroll through and find the event I'm at and then scroll through and find it. It's like, your phone knows where you are. It should know what race you're at. so that was like one of the first priorities for me. It's like,
the amount of times that I'll close the app and then I'll open my phone and I have to do it again. And now I have to refine the event. And then like, I should not have to search up. Like, I shouldn't have to go kart racing. Here's the series that I'm at. And then even after I click on the series, it's like, what track are you at? What do you mean, what track am I at?
How do you not know that?
I'm here.
Yeah. Where's the series? Oh, like, I think we can go on and on about how cool this is. I think you solved about 10 different issues that put into one app and made it, again, it's just expedited the process. It's made everything so much easier. I think your Supernats example is perfect, and you can go beyond Supernats. You can go to any series. You can look at the pro stuff, right? Where these guys have a pretty quick turnaround sometimes, right? Like, for me, it's what the sport needs, and it was a problem that was like, for some people, it wasn't even a problem they knew they had, and now it's like, oh yeah, no, this is a problem. For me, it's I just didn't know how to. I obviously have no idea what I'm doing on the software side of things, but like in the back of my mind for years, I'm like, man, there's got to be an easier way than me scrolling forever to find my own name half the time, right? It's like, you said.
Hang on, Alexander. Like, you only have to scroll a long way to find your own name if you finished way back in the pack.
I was waiting for that. Yeah. I was waiting for that.
Quiet and sinker.
I knew the second I said it, I'm like, oh,
Wait, you served that one up pretty good there.
But in general, right? Like you said, like there's certain times where if you're in portrait mode, I gotta swipe right to go look at my lap times. Why is that a thing? Why is it so zoomed in? Like even just stuff like that. And it's like then you're scrolling down the lap times and it's like, oh, now I have to go back left to see who actually did that lap time. So
Yeah. So one of the things that, like, if I go try to find something else, like when you click that menu and that menu flies out and you see the other things, one of the things at the top, it's still showing you the live timing for the race that you're in. Is it green? Who's in the lead? Who's got the purple lap? So it's all, there's going to be so many little Easter eggs through the app that people will say, oh, wow, why didn't other people think of that? And this goes back to, like, because these people aren't racers. That's the bottom line.
well, I think there's one more thing that we want to get into. There's a bit of a fun segment that every once in a while we bring up when things are, when there's topics that need to be discussed. And I think one of them was obviously the penalty point system. But we made a post yesterday talking about, what do we think of the penalty point system? And well, we've introduced the Coastal Link call-ins. We've seen them before. They've done well. And a couple people called in. We had 4 call-ins. I actually literally have not heard these. I don't know if you have, Emery.
Either.
I literally have no idea what this is going to be. But we have 4 of them. I know one of them is the Andrew Boyda show, and that one's going to be it's Andrew, right? So we know it's going to be good. But we'll save that one for last. But Isaiah Maxey, first call-in. I have no idea what these are, so let's listen to what Isaiah has to say about what he thinks of the penalty point system.
It's Isaiah Maxey, and I kind of like the penalty systems. I kind of don't. I think they're good because it stops a lot of people from just intentionally taking people out, and just it helps a lot more cleaner racing. But I also don't like it because, like, if you either accidentally put somebody off or you just accidentally do something that's not very good, and like you get a penalty, and those penalties, they carry over to your next races, and all the points rack up. And then when you accidentally run somebody off, you just don't leave the space, and you thought you were clear, then like it just racks up, and you have nothing you can do.
So for me,
it's Isaiah.
Hang on, I didn't get any audio. I didn't hear it.
So he said that he likes it in certain instances, right, where it eliminates people intentionally ramming people off the racetrack. He doesn't like it in the cases where if you accidentally move somebody, if you accidentally get into somebody, if you thought you were clear but you weren't. For me, this leads into you'll never know intent. Intent is the one thing that we will never know what a driver was thinking. You can get a pretty good idea, but you'll never know intent. It doesn't eliminate the results, right? And part of it is like you can't have results-based analysis, but if you accidentally get into somebody and that accidental shove loses that guy 5 spots, you can't come in and say, oops, right? Like you're still going to get incident responsibility. Now then the question, it begs the question of, well, should you get penalty points for that? Well, again, you'll never know intent. So the penalty points you get for accidentally getting into somebody will be the same as if you purposely got into somebody. Now, obviously, if you purposely got into somebody and it's bad enough and it's deemed retaliation, that's worse off than incident responsibility. But incident responsibility or anything, kind of what he was getting into, incident responsibility will be incident responsibility no matter the intent.
Yeah. If I set my friend's kitchen on fire 4 times, I'm still going to have to pay a lot of money. I might not get caught. I might not get charged for arson if I did it accidentally 4 times. I might just be an awful cook. But I'm still going to have to pay a lot of money for it. Now, if I commit arson and I burn it down, the first time I'm going to jail for it. I'm in trouble. But if I do it 4 times, if I do it enough times, my friend's going to banish me from his place. I'm going to pay him a bunch of money. And I'm probably still might end up in jail at some point. So I think in all seriousness, like there's a level of penalty where, like, if you retaliate against someone, that carries a lot of penalty points. Severe avoidable contact that you could argue the intent of has the opportunity to be escalated further than the minimum penalty points. So I think that takes care of itself. And you have to really have a lot of avoidable contact penalties for it to come into consideration. Like, if you go down the TSRS archives of all the people that have racked up penalty points this year, there's only one driver that's in the 20s, and that's obviously a lot. But there's only two drivers that are above 10 points overall. So like it's rare that you rack up enough penalty points from incidents for that to become a consideration. And of those drivers, I think you would really have a hard time saying that every single one of those incidents were just, oh yeah, I accidentally, potted my guy off the track, or I accidentally cut turn 2 and re-entered right in front of half the field. Like I think ultimately there is a point where yes, intent does carry some value, but I think that gets filtered out by the amount of penalties it takes to truly get like a race ban, if that makes sense.
I agree. All right, let's listen to this second call in here.
Yeah, Gary Smith, Sebring, Florida, former Carter, state and national rankings. I think that the penalty system should just be left neutral the way it is. If these guys had to race back in the day with like a Lynn Haddock or a Kyle Atkins or a Jeff Hudlett or Philip Giebler or any of those kind of guys, they would have not even been able to survive from the roughness and the driving and sheer ability that these guys had to move you and get around you, but without spinning you out. So I think that the penalty system should just be left alone. Let them settle it out on the track, and what goes around comes around. Have a nice day.
So that's a different discussion, right? I actually do know him. He's somebody that I've actually coached. I still do. We were actually recently at Sebring together. So again, shout out Gary Smith. Interesting discussion. Interesting point from his side, right? He's more of an old school racer, where it's decided on the racetrack. For me, there's certain instances where it's like, okay, he got into him, the guy got back into him. All's fair. But there's still the whole point of the penalty point system is we're not trying to like say, listen, like we want to, take away your guys' right to kind of get after it and get your elbows out, but we want to stop the repeat offenders. This is what it's for, right? For the guys that are for the guys that are causing the epidemic of, well, I'm going to white line the whole racetrack. I'm going to block. I'm going to get into you. I'm going to use you up a little bit. That's what it's for, more than completely eliminating, the Speed Sports, Gavin Bailiff, Billy Musgrave incident, right? Like that wouldn't be deemed anything. And that was as old school as it gets, right? Bump and run, move up the racetrack, get around him. He wins. Nothing was said about it. Well, a lot was said about it, but nothing was done about it, right? And I think it should be left that way. But for the guys that want to pod somebody off the racetrack, well, you're going to get some penalty points for it.
100%. End of the day, like, first off, the discussion of racecraft in the 80s and 90s versus now, like it's a completely different sport. I even argue 10 years ago, racecraft standards were quite a bit different. Racing standards were a lot different than they are now. But as a whole, I mean, I think if nothing else, it's a good experiment. It's good to see. I'm sure each series will have their own kind of iteration of it, and whatever works will get used going forward. Whatever doesn't might get thrown to the wayside. But we need to kind of take a step forward with these sorts of initiatives.
We have 2 more call-ins left. Before I do that, I know it's getting dark over there for you, Keith. I know you guys are still driving. Like, are you good for these next 2 call-ins? You have to go?
Muted.
You muted yourself there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm good. I turned the light on, man. Had to plug the phone in, but we're good. Let's keep going.
All right, perfect. We got 2 more here. This one's from David Baker, who I think is actually still watching right now. He's been in the comments, so let's see.
What's up, guys? My name's David Baker, also known as D-Bake on the track. As a person who has 15 penalty points myself, I just know this is going to kill CKNA, especially with the Apex karting series starting up. CKNA, that's the nail in the coffin for them. It just shows how they're just trying to cover up their bad officiating from the past and really just hammer home good racing, but it's too little too late, I think. That whole PVK thing is kind of crazy. Palladino flipped his cart and then went over to the crowd with a lot of emotion. I don't know, it's just kind of what you expect. What's up, guys?
All right. So, with all due respect, I severely disagree. You can't look at a system that is meant to improve the quality of racing. And to the comment we just got here from Howie, asking, do we think the system is doing anything to actually improve the quality of racing? Just curious. Absolutely. Absolutely. You can't look at a system that is meant to penalize you for poor driving, for, just being somebody who's a repeat offender, to kind of minimize that and think that's going to, one, not improve the quality of racing, and two, it's going to put the nail in the coffin for a series that is, well, for the last couple of years at their largest event has, well, hosted the largest event in go-karting by entry count. That's just not how it works, right? So for me, this only makes it better. It only strengthens the, I guess, makes you want to go to the series more. Yeah, that's where I'm at. Emery?
Yeah,
I think Keith can go. I want to hear Keith's take on this.
I didn't get to hear all of his thing. I know David. He's a good kid. I think he got in some trouble at the event, and I think anybody who's in that position is going to have a negative feeling towards the thing. To the comment on the thing, is it making things better? I think the intent is. I think we've got one race with the system under our belt, and the principles in the matter are saying let's adjust. So I think everybody's heading in the right direction. I think it's just going to take time before we know, does it make it better? Logically, it passes the test to all of us. Yes, this is going to make things better. We may be on this call a year from now and say, you know what? It didn't make things better. It made things worse. I don't know how that could be the case, but I'm a scientist by nature. That's what engineers, sciences, all very similar. It's follow the data. The data tells you the truth. And so let's see if it makes it better. But keeping the status quo, just keeping things the way they are, and having a bunch of guys gripe about it wasn't this way in the old days and stuff, that's not moving the sport forward. The kid who's out there right now racing Mini wasn't alive when you were last racing. Quit telling me about the days before they had side pods. It doesn't have any bearing on what we're doing today.
Yep.
Yeah.
Could have said it better myself.
I mean, look at it this way. If we're arguing against a measurement that is used to track drivers and sort of highlight the bad apples, if you think that's a problem, that we have data on this, that we want to keep track of drivers that are consistently causing issues that rise to the level of penalty, then we need to ask ourselves, are we really looking for quality races? Are we really looking for an experience that people want to be a part of? Because that's a serious question. If you're going to say that this issue is a step back, or CKNA trying to cover up their own calls, is it perfect? Is CKNA's officiating perfect? Absolutely not. None of the series are. I mean, the fact that this is kind of peeling behind the fourth wall a little bit, that if we took this call-in graphic about recent penalty systems and recent officiating, that all four of, I would say, the four biggest series in the U.S. probably had a little bit of uncomfortability about this conversation with us, because there's little bits and pieces that they've made in the last 2 months that maybe they get brought up, maybe they don't get brought up, maybe people have complaints about it, maybe they don't. Each series has those things, right? And so, we can have this discussion on, did Series X do this right or do this wrong? Series Y choosing to bring in this penalty point system, while Series Z kind of decides to do their own thing. But at the end of the day, they're actively trying something to add data to the sport, add kind of intel on it that sort of sorts out the drivers that are consistently causing problems. And if you think that that effort is still like not worthwhile, that like it's just covering something up that's a waste of time, then ultimately like I think we need to reevaluate what our priorities are as individual customers of the sport. Like, are we trying to make this a quality sport or an easy sport? Are we trying to make this something that is a complacent kind of a settled sport, or are we trying to push the boundaries forward and actively make it a better experience for everyone? And if we aren't, then well, we can just sit here and not do a penalty point system, not try anything, and 5 years from now, I'll come back from law school, I'll come back from whatever, it's gonna be the same spot.
Emory, it's only supposed to take you 2 years to go through law school.
I'm accounting for some possible issues. But, hopefully it's a 3-year path, not 5. But we never know. Just like we never know where the sport's going to be when I come back.
Yeah.
Well, we have one more call. It's from Andrew Boyd show. So let's see how this goes.
All right, we're looking at penalty system. I think we're doing it all wrong. I think we should take a look at hockey. Those players that take it out on each other. Right? You got a problem, you take it out on each other. So that's my thoughts. I think we should look at hockey and see how they do it. Other than that, for the little guys, yeah, I think we should rate dumb stuff to really dumb stuff and penalize accordingly. Really, really dumb stuff, you go to the back. A little bit of a dumb thing, all right, slap them on the wrist. But, yeah, those are my thoughts regarding penalties.
Okay. Well, again, can't say I didn't expect it. Can't say that if I were to just see Andrew Boydishow's name as a call-in about penalty point system, I probably could have just written you the answer that he gave. And again, that's why we love Andrew, right? That is why he's one of the most entertaining drivers that we have. But I can't sit here and act like, let's not look at one of the roughest points in the country and compare that to racing. Again, like it does go back to like the shifter guys race a little bit different, right? And we talked about it earlier. Like there's a little bit more leeway, I'd say, in what those guys are allowed to do. And, they could probably use the front nose cone a little more than others because we have no pushbacks. And again, it seems like it's a little more subjective with those guys. To his point, I think a good point he made was like with the kids, right? Like, yeah, let's not allow them to go after it with each other. But it shouldn't be different if you're in micro or mini versus junior, senior, or even in the pro ranks. It really shouldn't be any different the way it's actually approached. So that's what I'll say on that. Emory, anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head on that one.
Yeah, I think, yeah, as much as, listen, I mean, as much as it would be entertaining to say, oh, that guy got into that guy, I can't wait for the next corner, right? That's not how we progress the sport. And that's what we're trying to do with the penalty point system. And that's what Keith does such a good job about. So, have a couple more comments in. Actually, I want to read this one here. It's a bit of a longer comment, so I didn't get a chance to read it yet. But from Howie again, the current culture is also an influence. I've overheard several conversations recently of parents talking to their cadet kids, telling them to wall that kid, quote unquote, and put them off the track. This is not isolated. Multiple conversations I've had to hold back from saying something. It illustrates the nature of what's expected from the current kids. And I actually could not agree more with that statement in terms of, I also don't agree with telling your son or daughter or, to go out there and wreck somebody. But I agree with the fact that I've heard this and I've been kind of on the other side of, I've coached many young drivers and I've overheard that being told to my driver's opposition. Right. And that is just not okay. It doesn't matter the age, but obviously kids are in micro mini, they're more influenced from either coaches, parents, or racing they watch. And that is why we kind of put these pro guys like on one, I don't want to say like on a pedestal, but higher up for a couple reasons. One, very entertaining. Two, it's the fastest engine package. Same way we deal with any form of motorsports, NASCAR, IndyCar, F1. It's the highest rank of their respected, series and sanctioning body. But number two, it's like if you watch a guy in OK and Stars, Pro Stars, X30, Pro Shifter, wall somebody. If I'm in micro or mini and I look up to that guy, well, I'm going to do the same thing. And that's not what we want, right? So I think to Howie's point, right, it's a lot of what we see, a lot of what is told to the younger generation is so important on their development. And it is so important to constantly pay attention to what their kid is like seeing on the racetrack and also what they're being told. Because there's often times where I've seen many kids that grow up to be, junior, senior, they're more of a menace on the racetrack. And then you look back at their upbringing and it's like, oh, well, they were told from a young age that it's okay to open your hands up and put them in the grass. And then when you get into the bigger chassis, you get into car racing, hopefully eventually in your career, if that's the direction you want to go, you want to stay and do pro karting, that's not going to be allowed. And that's ultimately, to sum it all up, the penalty point system that is being implemented will stop that. Because if you do it once, shame on you. Do it twice, really shame on you. Do it 3 times, you're probably out for a session, right? And then hopefully that'll deter you away. And if not, you keep doing it, you're out for a race. Or maybe you're out for 6 months. Maybe you're out for a year. And maybe that'll finally get it through your head of like, okay, this is not allowed. And that's the ultimate goal. And so that's where I think if you're someone that is wary about the penalty point system, if you're someone that doesn't know if it's good or wrong for the sport, chances are, one, you're probably on the end of maybe you're one of the repeat offenders, right? And that's why you don't want it. But number two, it's like you can't look at a system that is meant to deter people like that and think that is not going to actually improve the sport. That's where I'm at. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that, but that's kind of where I'm at. And that's more of a personal thing for me as someone who does a lot of coaching with younger drivers. It is so frustrating to see coaches and parents that I've seen personally tell a kid, hey, that kid did you wrong, do it back. No.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it falls into the retaliation side.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Which is actually worse, right? Like you look very silly if you let someone get in your head that much that you do it back to them, because now they're no longer the bad guy.
Yeah, and you have to apply a little bit of game theory here. If you look at technicals that get called in the NBA or flags that get thrown in the NFL, oftentimes the person who gets the tech or gets the flag thrown is the retaliatory actor.
Yep.
The first action drew everybody's attention, and then you see the thing happen. So it's like that's one of those things that's just bad advice, period, to tell them to kind of go, do something, retaliate, whatever. It just there's no good that's going to come from that. Hopefully, it gets caught on the track, penalties called, things like that. But telling your kid to go retaliate is fraught with danger. I understand the frustration of a lot of other dads. It's like, well, that kid keeps wrecking my kid, keeps running my kid, and he's a bully. He's got to stand up for himself. But it's one thing when you're on the playground getting pushed around. It's another thing when you're wheeling a 160-pound machine that can result in someone's death if you're not smart.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like, I almost accidentally went at Alex again there, but ultimately, like, there is some level of, I guess, understanding I have for the parents. They're like, you can't let this kid just push you around over and over and over again. Because ultimately, like, using your NBA analogy, like, there's a reason Draymond Green, he might get 16 techs a year, but he also gets away with more than any other player in the league would, But on the flip side, like, someone that doesn't sort of stand their ground, like, tends to get maybe the worst end of the whistle. And so when they do something that can be slightly retaliatory, they're going to get a penalty for it. So I think ultimately, like, you have to look at these sorts of conflicts with a little bit of nuance, but it's a bad look for the sport and for the individual if we're preaching retaliation. And ultimately, it bears out consequences. Like, usually the drivers that cause collisions in some capacity it ultimately backfires. It evens out. They might get a positive result in one race, but you go through the year, and for the most part, even the drivers that are overly aggressive that get themselves into one too many incidents, like they pay for it. Rarely do you see a driver that initiates a lot of contact over the course of an entire season and it doesn't catch up to them at some point. They don't lose out by it. So while it's tempting to go for that and kind of establish yourself, kind of add in the credibility of, hey, like I'm not going to be pushed around. Very few instances in karting do you gain from kind of intentionally using your cart to sort of push someone off. Now, granted, like you have to be aggressive. There's a very fine line between like not being a pushover and kind of being passive. But I do think like ultimately you have to kind of understand that if you're doing something for as a reaction to what other people have done to you on track, you're approaching it the wrong way.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. So I think with that, I think it's a good place to kind of end this discussion. It's been one of our longest episodes, but I think also one of our best episodes. I think we've, at least unless you have anything else to add, Emery, I think we've dived into everything that we want to talk about with Keith. I think this has been one of the most open discussions we've ever had on this show, and it's been awesome. So Emery, unless you have anything else to add, if Keith, you have anything else to add, usually we kind of end these segments with, our guests kind of telling the people back at home watching, obviously who you are, what you do, upcoming races that maybe you and Eli are going to, the future of what we could expect for RaceSelect. The future, the floor is kind of all yours to kind of just promote RaceSelect, promote yourself, promote Eli, whatever you want to kind of talk about here.
Yeah, no, it's been long for everybody, so I won't take too long. I'm sure a lot of you interested are like, all right, I want the app, like, give it to me. It any day now, it could release. We're basically waiting on Apple's approval to go ahead and pull the trigger and let it out to the public. So hopefully that could come tonight. Could be a week from now. It's hard to say when it's going to happen. As for us, we were privateers for basically our whole life, and we joined Coach Driver Development this year, and it really has kind of really taken Eli to the next level. So if you're a privateer, you're out there and you're like, should I go to a team? Find you a team, find somebody you like that's going to pay attention to your kid and teach him, and pull the trigger on it. It's absolutely worth it. We enjoy our race weekends a lot more. We're more competitive than we were. We go to SKUSA Summer Nats next week. I'm in PKS at Newcastle 2 weeks after that. Looking forward to it. For those of you who don't know, or a lot of two-cycle racers watch this, if you get a chance, come run CKNA Grands. It is the most interesting and fun event you will be part of. And also right after that this year, doesn't get publicized a lot, but the 200 lap enduro at Newcastle is a radically different race than you've ever experienced. It's a lot of fun. You should consider putting a team together and coming and doing that. Otherwise, appreciate you guys at Kart Chaser. Love what Kart Chaser does, how it adds to our sport and makes sport here in America and what we do something that is really the envy of other parts of the world. So thank you guys so much for what you do.
Wow. Well said. And again, I think great point, right? CKNA Grands. If you haven't run it, it is a awesome race to go out there and run, actually. And then, like you said, the Mark Harrison Memorial, the 200 lapper, is as cool as it gets. And it's as different from sprint karting as you can actually get while still being in a sprint cart. So with that, Keith, thank you so much for sharing the last, 3 hours essentially with us. It's been very insightful. I think the viewers have absolutely loved the show, this episode. So have a good night. Have safe travels the rest of the night for you guys. I don't know. Are you guys still on the road a little bit longer tonight? What's the plan?
We're sitting in a Walmart parking lot right now. Eli and his mom are sitting out on the bed of the truck waiting for me to be done.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, get back to being on the road, guys. Safe travels. Thank you for joining us, Keith.
All right. See you guys.
Wow. I feel bad now making Keith wait so long. No, that was a great show. I think we learned a lot. I learned a lot because I kind of went into this knowing what I wanted to talk about, but I actually didn't know a whole lot about like the live timing like you did, Emery, because you kind of brought that in. And then obviously the AI stuff was really, really cool. Whether you're a tech guy or not, it is cool. And I think everyone in the comments was pretty excited for it. So with that, I'm not going to take up much of anybody's time here because it's already been a very long show. So for myself, Alexander Searle from Emery Lida, it's been a good show. Episode 57. See you guys next time.